Hello my friends, and welcome to this Fullstack NextJS course where I'm going to teach you how to build an invoice manager. Aside that, I'm going to be teaching you a lot of what you're going to use when you are building an actual real world application. So the principles of production I'm going to pay attention to. So first of all, to create an invoice, you click on this button and it brings up this pop-up where you can select a customer and you select an amount, so 500, and then you click on create invoice. It's going to create that invoice and this page will be updated without even reloading the page. Now, of course, you can delete an invoice. So for example, if I wanted to delete this particular one, I click on the delete, but you need to specify the action keyword. So in our case, we set it to be delete, but you can set it to be anything you want. And you click on delete. It's going to remove that invoice instantly from the page. The page is updated automatically without any page reload. Now, I can also edit an invoice. So if instead of saying 500 here, I wanted to change this to actually 400, I can create that invoice and it will be changed to 400. Last but not the least, we can search. So for example, if I wanted to search for the name, the email, the amount, or whether it's paid or unpaid, I can do any of that here. So let me start by searching for Jane. So it's going to look for all the data that has to do with Jane in their names or in their email, and it will show me that. If I wanted to search for the amount, all I just need to say, let's say 50, for example, it filters and shows me anything that has 50 in the amount. Or if I wanted to search for unpaid, so I'll just say unpaid, and it will just show me everything that is unpaid. Now, last but not the least, if you want to, the search is the page is also paginated, the data is paginated rather. So if you scroll down, you see we have page 1 and page 2. This ensures that if you have 1000 entries in your database, you don't fetch all of them at the same time, so you fetch only what is needed. So if I click on page 2, it's going to fetch the second page for the data, and that's what you see here, page 9 or number 9. But if I go back to page 1, it doesn't refetch, it just shows me what was already there before. So there's intelligent caching. So in this project, you're going to learn most of what you're going to use. Now, last but not the least, you can actually fire this email out to the customer. So if I click on this icon that says send email, just by clicking on it, it will tell me that the invoice email sent successfully. And if I go to my inbox, oh, it's already there. So Xenotrust invoice notification, if you open that, you will see, so this is 400 and this is the name of the customer, which matches what we have here, 400 and the name of the customer. So I'm going to show you how you can create very dynamic emails, and not just, default emails. I'm going to show you how you can customize templates and all of that in this project. So that's about it for this one. Let's get started. Now, before we get started, if you would like to learn everything that you need to know in order to build production level NextJS application, I'm talking about complex level application, then you should definitely check out my NextJS full stack course, where we build a project which I call Superblog. It's an AI enhanced blog that enables you to auto post to dev.to, Medium, and Hashnode. I'm going to leave a discount link in the description for just maybe 24 to 48 hours. So if you want to take advantage of it, make sure you check that out. But even if you don't intend to get it, just check out the demo and you're not going to lose anything. All right, so I'll leave a link in the description. Let's get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up our project. So for our tech stack, we're going to use Next.js for both the front end and the back end. For our styling, we're going to use Tailwind CSS and ShadCN, which is a UI library for, built on top of Tailwind CSS. Then we're going to store our data in MongoDB. So aside these three things I said, we're not really using any external thing. So this is a purely Next.js project. So for us to get started, I'm going to create an empty folder where we'll now create. So inside this empty folder, I would say Invoice Manager, Invoice Manager, -manager. Okay, so it's an empty folder which I'll just right click and open with Visual Studio Code. Now I'll need to bring in the Visual Studio Code in here because it's opened in another folder. So now that this is open, we're going to need to clone a starter template, so we don't have to start setting up Next.js from scratch. We already have a starter template for that. So this is the starter template. I'll leave a link to this in the description. So but what I'm going to do is I'll just grab the code, which is this code here, this link to the starter template, and then I'll come back here and open up my terminal. In my terminal, what I want to type is, I want to say, okay, let me close this one first. So I want to say git clone, and then I'll just paste in that starter template, and then I'll give a space and say ./ to ensure that it creates this template inside of this folder. So I'll just come here and hit enter, and it will start cloning. So but what do we have in this starter template? Well, I'm going to show you now. After you've installed the starter template, if you come here, you'll see you know, some of the things we have. So I'll just come here and say npm install and hit enter. It will install all the packages that we've already, you know, used in the starter template, and everything can be located in your package.json. So if you want to see like some of the packages that we have there, you can just look at it. So basically it's just an empty project that has some of the things that we need, like Tailwind CSS, Shad CN, a loading spinner, and maybe a loading button, and just a few things. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll just give it a couple of seconds to finish installing, and we're going to continue. Now, as you can see, it has finished installing. Now, to run this project, we just need to say npm run dev and hit enter. It's going to open this project in localhost, which you can see here. So what we need to do is we just need to click on this one, and it will open this project. So this is localhost 3001, because I already have one localhost running somewhere. So let's just give it a couple of seconds. So like I said, it's just an empty project with, you know, just this text in the middle of the page. So we just have a header and a footer, and then we have this text in the middle of the page. Nothing serious really. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a .env file. So I'll say .env.local. And the reason why we're creating this .env file is because we're going to need to create a MongoDB connection URI. So for us to do that, I'm going to come here and head over to MongoDB. So just make sure you have a MongoDB account, in which case you can easily create one. It's free. If you've done that, then you need to create a new project. So I'll just say new project, and I'll call that project Invoice Manager. So right here, let's click here and say Invoice Manager, and then I'll just come down and click on next. Okay, so it says create project. So just go ahead and click on create project. It's going to create that project for you. And next, it will ask you to create a cluster. Click on create, and it will create a cluster for you, but you need to specify the price of that cluster. So make sure you click on this free if you're not running a production project, and then just click on, so the cluster name, I'll leave it as cluster 0, and then I'll click on create deployment. So once that cluster is created, you'll be able to add a connection URI. So here it's saying create a database user. So this is the whole thing here. So if you just click on this create database user, you'll be able to add what is known as a connection URI, but I think I may not want to do that now. Okay, let me just click on it. I can always change my password if you see it. So once you've done that, you can now go ahead and let's see. Okay, so once you've done that, you can now go ahead and click on close. I think there's a button here that says close. And after that, you're going to see something that looks like, okay, so it says create cluster. We've already created a cluster. So you're going to click on connect. So I'll click on connect, and it will bring up this long string here. This is known as your connection URI. So you want to copy this guy, and you want to come to your .env file, and I'm just going to call that this variable here MongoDB underscore URI, I think, and I'll set that to be equal to this guy. So once you've done this, you need to change the password. Of course, I'm not going to put my password here, but I'm just pointing it out to you. Another thing you can do is this, after this mongodb.net, you can specify the name of the entire folder that will encapsulate all of your data. So for me, I'll just say invoice manager. So this will be the name of the enclosing folder that will wrap all my data. Then of course, don't forget to add your password. Once you've done this is what you need to do to set up your application as far as MongoDB is concerned. So in the next video, we're now going to start writing code. All right, I'll see you in the next one then. All right, we're back. Now let's go ahead and start modifying this home page. So what I'm going to do is I'll come to my source and my app, and this is the home page here. So we want to remove this guy. All right, and we want to say, instead of saying flex center, we're going to change this to flex and justify center. Justify center. Aha. Now inside of this guy here, we want to add a section, and this section is going to have some class. So class name, and we're going to set that to, first of all, we'll give it a width of full. Then we're going to give it a px of 2. Then we'll set a max width, so max width, and we're going to use a specific number. So here I would say 1000 pixels px. All right, so now inside the section, what do we have? So first off, if you look at the finished project, you see here we have first this section to create the invoice, and then we have the other one to list and filter the invoice. So those are two distinct components. So first off, I will say dot flex, then I would now say dot justify. You have to spell everything. Justify between, and then I'll tab that. So here we're going to now have the heading. So let's just use a H3 or maybe a H2, whichever one. So H3, and then we're going to say invoice manager. All right, so that's the first. Then here I'm going to give it a class name of, so this is going to be text of 2XL, not 3 but 2. Then we're going to set the font, so font dash semi bold. Aha, so that's the heading. Then next we're going to have the component which will create the invoice. Now I've not created this component, so if you save this file, you're going to get an error, but don't worry, we're going to create it. So this is the first section. Now let's create the next section. So I'm just going to come down here, and first off, I'll add a separator. Now I don't think I have a separator component from shardcn. And by the way, if you don't know about shardcn, you should probably take a look at that. So this is the website shardcn, and I want to just check if I installed the separator before starting the project. So I do have a separator. So let's add a separator here. So below, let me expand this guy a bit. Okay, so below this div, the first section here, we're going to add a separator like so. I'll say separator. Yeah, so make sure you import that. Now this separator is going to have a class name. So class name, let's do my-2. Then we're going to give it a border on the bottom, so border dash b, that's border bottom, and I'll just say 2 pixels, so 2 px. And then last but not the least, we're going to specify a border color. So there's a class I already created, a color class, border dash color, sorry, that should be color, and I say light blue. Yeah, no, just light blue. Okay, let me just remove the X. So border color light blue. Then last but not the least, I'm just going to come down and add another component which I have not created. I'll call that component list invoice CE, and then I'll just close it up. Now, like I told you, if I save this component, we're going to have errors on the page. So what I'm going to do is I would create these two components, create invoice and list invoice, before we now go ahead and save the component. So here I'll come here and go to my components directory, and I'll create a new folder which I'll call invoice. Now inside the invoice, I will now create the first one, which is create invoice.jsx and RFC. Hit enter on that. Then I will now say list invoice.jsx, invoice.jsx. Okay, then RFC and hit enter on that as well. So save. So now I can now confidently come back here and try to import it. So import the first one, import the second one. Now if I go ahead and save this page and come here, we should see something entirely different. So we have the invoice manager, we have the line, and this text, create invoice, list invoice. Okay, so I believe I want us to start from creating an invoice. I mean, because that's the logical place to start. So in the next video, we're going to create an invoice. We're going to start working on the create invoice component. All right, I'll see you in the next one then. So for us to start working on the create invoice component, we need to, let me show you. So when you click on this button, it brings up this modal here, and this modal is a reusable component. So we need to use a component in CN, and the name of that component is alert dialog. So if you click on this alert dialog, you come down here, you're going to see the command to install it. So just select your installer and then come here. I would open up my terminal and I'll open a new terminal to install it. So paste that in. Now, if I'm going to be okay, maybe I should just take it one step at a time. So I'm just going to hit enter and it's just going to start installing. So let me bring this guy down. Now, while it's installing, let's begin to set up. So what I'll do is I'll come here and you know what, first I'll just copy all of these guys because I'm going to need it to create a dialog box. And I'll come back here, and inside of our components, we have this folder which we call widgets. So invoice widget. Now this widget is where I like to create things that I reuse across my entire application. So here I'm just going to create a new file which I will call action modal.jsx, right? It's a component. So first off, we post in this guy. Oh no, maybe not. So I'll just remove this and say RFC, and it's going to be action modal. Then we can now go ahead and paste in this guy. So then after that we would, okay, hold on, okay, there's something wrong with the internet fetching the, okay, so it has installed. Now I'm going to come here back to CN. I'll just copy everything you see here and come back to my code and then slot it inside here. All right, I'll paste this in. Now, because we are creating this action modal as a reusable component, right? We're going to need to, you know, have a lot of props. So for example, this text here that says alert dialog title, we're going to make it a prop that's just going to have the name title. This trigger that says open, we're also going to make it a prop. So let me just bring in all of the props that we need. So to make these components completely reusable, first of all, we'll give it a children prop, then trigger, then we're gonna give it a title prop, a description prop. What else? The button text, so btn text. What else? The on click for when you want to fire an action, then open for when the dialog is open, and set open. So all of these props are what we're going to need to make this component entirely dynamic. So we're going to start here. So in the action dialog, we're going to set open to open. Then we're going to say on open change, and we're going to point it to set open. So these guys here will determine when the dialog is open and when it is closed. Then for this one here, this trigger, we'll do like this, and then we're just going to add the trigger prop. Okay, so what else? Then I think the next one is the title. So of course we'll just remove this title here and we'll add in the title prop. What else? Description, we're going to add in the description prop. So you see how easy it is to make a component reusable. Then what else? The cancel button. I think for the cancel button, I'll just leave it as cancel because it's pretty much standard. Then next, I'll come here and say that if there is a button text, then I want to display. So and we'll use the and operator, and then I'll just open this guy. So if there's a button text, I want to display this action dialog, and then this action dialog here, I would come here and instead of saying continue, I'll display the button text. So btn text. Then I will now add my on click here. So on click, and that's also going to point to on click. Is there any other thing I need to do? I think this is what we need to make this component entirely usable. If you come here, okay, one last thing, children. So between the dialog header and footer, so this is the dialog, hold on, this is the dialog header and this is the dialog footer. So now between the dialog header and footer is where I'll now slot in the children prop. All right, so just like this what's it called, just like this is completely reusable, but we need to actually see that it's reusable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my create invoice component, and I'll just open it up. So, and then I'll bring in the action model. So it has to be like this: action model with an opening and a closing tag. Make sure you import it. So I'm going to import it, and then inside of this opening tag, we're going to add all the props we created for the action model. So first of all, we need to have a title. Excuse me. So we need to have a title. So I'll say title, and the title is going to be set to create invoice. All right. Then we're going to have a description. Let's just say create new invoice, and we're going to have a trigger. So the trigger, TRI, is going to be a button. So inside of this trigger, we're going to add we're going to add a button, and that button is from CN. So make sure you import it, and then you just tab it like this. Okay, I don't know why it's not, you know, let me just do it like this and say button and close that. Aha. So now the button will say create invoice. You know, not just create invoice, right? Because aside the create invoice, we have this plus icon. So what we're going to do is in this button, we're going to say we want it to have a class name, and that's going to be set to. So first off, let's give it okay, span. No, not span. Okay, so I'll say text white, text dash white. Then I'll now say space x of 1. So now this space x of 1, what it ensures is that if there are multiple components inside the button, it's going to put some space between those components. So I'll take this create invoice, I'll cut it and put it here. So this will be the first one. Then I'll now add a plus icon here. No need to just use a React icon, just add a plus icon and then increase the size of the plus icon. So I'll set the size of the plus icon to be text hyphen large. All right, let me format it. So this is going to be our trigger. All right, then we're now going to have the, we're now going to have the open. So open, and that's also going to be set to open. It's a state we've not created, but we're going to create it. Then lastly, we'll have set open, which is also going to be set open. Then what will now be the children of this modal? So for now, I'm just going to have a h world. So hello world. Okay, let me just have a h1 that will say invoice. Okay, so now that we've done this, let's create this state because we've not created this open and set open state. So I'll just come here, come to this line, and hopefully, yeah, so the AI helps me create it. So I'll just import the use state like so, and then I'll save. And all things being equal, we should be able to have a refreshed page that, okay, so I felt that error was coming because I had not added the what's it called, the props, but I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. You're importing a component. Oh, use state. So because we are using use state, sorry, we need to have the use client here, and I think that should fix it up. All right. Wow, what's going on here? Okay, I probably need to install the alert dialog properly because actually I just copied it and pasted it in. So let me just install it again, and that problem should be fixed. So I've installed it properly, and now you see here we have this create invoice. If I click on the create invoice here, if I click on create invoice here, you see we have this guy and we just have this invoice text inside of it. So what we can do next is we can now integrate the forms. So if you come here, right, instead of just having this guy, we can now add the form inside of the alert dialog. All right, so that's what we're going to do in the next one. All right, so to integrate this form, we're going to need some components in CN. So the first one is we're going to need a form. So if you come down here, you will see this is the form component. So we're going to need the form component. We're going to need the select component. Wait, hold on, I'm trying to look for it. So this one, select, and then lastly we're going to need the radio group. So this one. So we're going to need 3 components. So let's install the 3 components. So what you can do is you can just copy this installation command and come to your terminal. If you paste that in, now instead of installing it one after the other, after this first component, you can just give it space and type more components you want. So for example, if you need a form, if you need a radio group, so radio hyphen group, but the name has to be the same on the ShardCN website. If you just hit enter on this, it will install the 3 once and for all. So since we have the 3 of them installed, what we can just do is I think, which one did I click? Okay, I want to click the form. So where's my form? So this is the form here. Okay, so just get to the form, and so this is just the code example. Let me look for how we can get started with this. Okay, so first off, you need to import some of these things. Hold on. Yes, so this one is perfect. So I'm just going to first copy this import statement like this. I'll come here and slot it in inside of my create invoice. Then I would also need to bring in this form schema. So I'll come here, copy this form schema. I would just put it outside here. It doesn't need to be inside your component. Then I will now scroll down, and then I will copy this form. So copy this form, and in this one now will now come inside of your component. So I'll just come here, paste it in, and last but not the least, I will now copy the onSubmit function. So this is the function to submit the form. So I think, yeah, you can just copy it from here and then just come here and slot it in. So now this is the because we're not using TypeScript here, so I'm just going to remove these types. Aha. So this is the essentially this is the structure of how you want to work with your form. Now what's the first thing we have on this guy? So we have this select, and it's just selecting the customers. Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to bring in an array of customers, and I'm just going to bring it in, right, because I already have it. I just created an array of customers, so I'll just slot it in. I'm trying to figure where it is in my code. Okay, I found it. So here I'm just going to come after the form, or maybe before the form, it doesn't matter. I'll just come here and just paste in the customer. So basically I created this customer array which has an object or 3 objects that has ID, name, image, and email. Now this image is just from this website pravata.cc. basically just generates images for you. All right, so you don't have to then we now have 3 of them, so that's just it. So let me collapse this. Then let's start from the schema. So the schema is going to have 3 properties. So the name, which is this customer name, the amount, and then the status. So here I'm going to come here and change this username to name, and then I'll say name I'll just say name is required. Doesn't it? Just name is required. So name is required. Keep it simple. All right, so after the name, like I said, we're gonna have the amount and the status. So here we're just going to change this one to status, and then we'll just say status is required. Last but not the least, we're going to change this one to amount. Amount should have come first actually, but that's still fine. Amount. Aha. So these are the 3 pieces of data we're going to need when we want to submit that form. So now that we have that, we can proceed to come down here. Now this form is actually just pointing to the entire form. So you can, from that form variable, you can pick out the values here. So, but what we want to do is we want to set initial values. So here, I'm not going to set an initial value for the name, right? Or I can just say name and set it to an empty string. Then I will say amount and status. So here, let's come here and say amount, and last but not the least, status. Okay, so these are the initial values. Now the initial value for the status, I'll set it to unpaid. Paid. All right, so that's it. Now this onSubmit function here is when you actually click to submit the form, and essentially what we're doing here is we're just logging the values of the form to the console. That's basically what we're logging to the console. And maybe what I'll just do is I'll just come here and destructure the values out. So I'll say const is equal to, no, sorry, not const is equal to const, then an object to destructure, and I want to destructure from the values. So here we can now destructure the properties in the form, such as the name, the amount, and the status. So we've destructured those three properties. Then is there any other thing? Yeah, I think it's fine like this for now. So I will now come inside this form. This is where I will now start building out the form. So I'll remove this guy and we're going to start with the select. So I'm going to come to shardcn and look for my select, which is right here. We've already installed it, so all we just need to do is to bring it in. So I think I'll just grab, okay, no, let me look for the form. Okay, so this is the form right here. So I'll just go to the code for this form, and we have the form. We've imported the form, I think. I'm not too sure. Okay, so this is what we need to bring, the select. So I'll just copy this select import and come to the code and scroll up. Okay, we've not imported the form. That's what I was trying to check. So just import the select first, then come back here and import the form. So just copy the form import and just slot it somewhere. So we can collapse it and then just come down and slot it somewhere. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can now come inside. So we've imported all this form schema, blah, blah, blah. So, but what we need now is to bring in the entire form with the select field inside. So let me just copy. This is where the form ends, and then I'm just going to copy it. And then I'll come here and scroll down to the action modal. So this will now be inside the children. So I'll slot in the form. Aha. So what do we have here? So we have, hold on. So we have the form and all of that. Is the form.handle submit is pointing to our onSubmit function. That's okay. So what we want to do is we want to change this form field. So this one is going to say name. All right. Then the form label will also say name. Okay. Then what else? Okay. So now you see this form. In fact, let me just save it so that we see what we have, you know, so that I don't just get to start editing so much. So what are we saying here? It says form.handle submit is not a function. Okay, let me see what's going on there. Okay, so I'm taking a look at this guy, and I think it's because we did not remove these types. So we just need to remove the types so that it's just use form, because we're not using TypeScript after all. So form.aha. So now if you click this guy, okay, we did not import the link, and we don't even need the link safe. So let me just remove that once and for all. So you see this link here, we don't need it. We don't need the form description at all. So, okay, since I'm here, right, let me just remove some of the things we don't need. So like this one now that says width of 2.5, I just need to say width of full. And then this one that says space y of 6, I think that's really too much. I want to reduce it to space y of 3. Okay, so now everything should be fine. We should be able to see the form. Aha, so if I click here, I can see this guy, and it just has these emails inside of it. All right, so now that we have this guy, what we want to do is we want to map through the customer details and display it here. So let me show you how we're going to do that. So inside of this guy, if you come here, you're going to see, okay, let me collapse this one. You're going to see this select group. Okay, so this is a select trigger. It says select verified emails. So what we want to say is we want to say select a customer. So select a customer. All right, that's the trigger. Then the select content. Well, we're not just going to have all of this. What I'm going to do is let me just come down here, and then I'm just going to have something called a select group. So here I'll say select, and I don't know why they did not add the select group here, right? They used to do that before, or there's a component where they did that. Okay, let me just say select group, and I'm just going to import that as well. Okay, so now this select group, let me close that up, and aha, so inside of this select group, so first I'll have a select label. So let's do select label, tap that as well, and this select label is just going to say customer. All right, so after this guy here, I will now come and map through my customers. So you know what, let me just do it like this. Let me open my empty fragment, and then I'll just say like this, and then I'll say customers query.map, and like so. So I would represent each customer as an item, customer item, and then I'm just going to open it up. So inside of this place here, or inside of this guy that I open up, let me just destructure the name from the customer, because it's only the customer name I need. So here I'll just say name, and then that's just going to be equal to item. So since we have the customer name, we can now return something. So I'll return, let's open our parentheses. So this return statement here is where we can now take one of these select items. So we don't need all, we just need one. So I'll just copy this select item and slot it in here. All right, so now this select item, instead of saying making the value to be static, I'm just going to make it dynamic, and the value will be the name. So let's also come here, remove this m.example, and then also reference the name. Then last but not the least, we need to give this a key because we mapped through something. So here I'll just say item.id, which is perfect, which still works. So by doing this, we've been able to map through the customer, and then we are now returning the name of each customer as a select item. So you see what we just did here. So since we're doing this, we can now get rid of all of these other select items. All right, I hope you appreciate how we walked through this, because I didn't want to rush. I wanted to take my time. So just go ahead and save that, and then if you come here, okay, is there something I did not import? Okay, let me just see what this error is once and for all. It says button. The thing is, I don't even know where this button error is coming from. I think it's when I reinstalled the button, but I don't want to waste time on it, so let's just leave it for now. Now I'll just click on this guy, and it says that we did not import select label. Oh, okay, that's true. So let's import it. So save that, and that should be done. So I'll click on import. I'll click on create invoice, and then if you select this guy now, you see that we now have the names. So we can now select each of the names. So since we have this in place, the other things we need to do is just to add the amount and the status, which I think is pretty straightforward. So for this one, we're just going to add an input. So let's come to shardcn and look for our input, which is this guy here. And if you scroll down, you're going to see where we have form. No, not file. Come on, form. This is what we need, this form here. Now, if you go to the code, all you just need to do is go to where you have the input. So this form field, I think is the input we have there. Yeah, so just copy the form field up to here, and just copy that, and then come here, and after this form field, which ends here, just come down and slot in the second form field. Now this one will say amount. It will point to the amount, and here we're just going to say amount. Then so we're going to get rid of course the placeholder will say amount. Then we're going to get rid of this description. We don't need any form description. So that's for the form field. So the last but not the least is the what's it called, radio group. So if you click on radio group and scroll to the bottom, you will see this example that has form in it. So if you click on that, you'll be able to just copy the I think for the radio group we need to import it afresh because we didn't import it before. So I think this is the import statement. So copy the import statement and first of all slot it at the top. So where is the top? So this one, and then come back here and just go to the form item itself. So this is the form item. Now this form field has a lot of properties that we don't need, so we're going to remove them. So I'll copy that, and one thing, I did not even save this file to check if there's any issue. So let me save it and come back here. Okay, so we did not import input, so let's just quickly do that. Where is the input? Okay, so this one from shardcn, from UI input, and I think that's it. So let's save again and come here. Aha, so you see we have the input. Now last but not the least, let's import the radio group. So I'll just give 2 spaces, tap that, and then just paste in the radio group. Now this radio group has a lot of options. If you come here to chat CN, you see that it has 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we just need 2. So I'm just gonna come here. Let's look at it. All messages. Okay, so here we need this one, the all messages, which is this form item. We need this second form item. Then I'm going to remove the last one. So this form item here that says, I'm trying to see where it ends so that I don't remove more than okay, so this form item, let's remove this one. Aha, and this one will say, this first one will say unpaid, then the value, so this value, instead of it to be all, it will also say unpaid. Then this one will say paid, value paid, and then it's also going to say paid here. I think that's it. Okay, we also have to point, so this will not say, this will say status. Then this name here will say status as well. I think that's it too. So let's just format and then save, and that should do it. That should do the trick. Aha, so we have the status. Aha, so last but not the least, this button here, we don't want it to be just, we want it to be full width and just want to give it some styling and all of that. So what I'll do is I would access the loading state of this form. So I think to access the loading state of the form, all we just need to say is we come here, we go up. Okay, let me collapse some of these guys. So we go up, and then we're going to say, I'll just put it after the form. So I'll just say const, and I'll say is loading, and that's going to be equal to, so we're now going to say form dot form state, and then dot is submitting. So this is how you point to the loading state of a form that is built with React hook forms. So this is React hook forms, yeah. So I will now come down here and I need to, is the form field I wanted to collapse. So the form field can collapse. Aha. So I will now come here. So instead of just pointing to this button, what we can do is we can say if is loading, then we want to point to something else, we want to point to something else. So is the else part here that I will now slot in this guy, and then I'll give this one a class name of with full. Hold on, am I missing something? Something is wrong here. Okay, maybe because I've not entered a value here. So if it's loading, I want to bring in my loading button component. So let me show you where that is coming from. It's in my loader.jsx. So in this my loader, it's part of what we had in the predefined template. So what I did was that I just created a button and I just put a spinner inside of it. So it's called a loading button component. It's just a button that has this spinner inside of it. That's all. And then we're going to give it this prop. So button text, button class, button variant, and all of that. So if I come here, I will now say loading button. So we've imported it, and then we can now give it the props like button text, and the button text will just say maybe loading, then what else, button class with full, and then last but not the least, button variant. So button variant, and then I'm just going to set this one to maybe outline, anything really. So that's it. So let's go format and then let's save. But also we need to test this form. So what I will do is I'll just say F12, because I want to be able to see the form in the, what's it called, I want to see the data. So I'll just select a customer, this guy. I would select an amount 40, and then I'll leave it as unpaid and click submit. And as you can see in the console now, we have those data here. So our form is ready and good to go. So in the next video, we are now going to start working on the back end side of things. All right, I'll see you in the next one. So I think I figured out where this error is coming from, and it's in our action modal, directly inside of our action modal. So if you come to shard cn, this is the action dialog. If you click on the code, you'll see that this trigger has this as child prop. So I think where I copied this action dialog, somehow I missed out copying the as child prop. So just copy that and then save, and that should get rid of the error that is, that error thing. So what we just need to do next is to work on the backend side of things. So I'm going to come here and let's go to our folder, this lib folder. Inside of this library folder, I'm going to say MongoDB db.js, and here is where I will now write the function to connect to MongoDB. So before you do that, make sure you have Mongoose installed. So I'll say npm install Mongoose, and I'll just hit enter on that. So it installs Mongoose, and we just need to import Mongoose right here. So import Mongoose, and then let's create the function to connect. So I'll say export. The name of that function will be connect MongoDB db, okay, and it's an asynchronous function, and basically we're just going to do a try catch block. I don't want to just do it directly, so I'll say try catch, and inside of my try block I just want to await. So how are we going to connect? Mongoose.connect. So from mongoose.connect, you give it an argument of your MongoDB URI, which is what we saved in our .env file, remember? So when you do this, well, if the connection is successful, you just want to return true. Okay, if it's not, you want to say okay, if it's not, I just want to log the error to the console. So I'll just say log, and I'll just log the error so that at least I can see what's happening, and all of that. So maybe I'll add a comment here and say connection error. So here I'll say connection error. All right. And so this is how you can connect to MongoDB. Straightforward, simple. So now that we have this out of the way, in the next video we're now going to create the what's it called? The model for the invoice. So the invoice model. I'll see you in the next one, yeah? Or there's one more thing we can do here. So we can say process.exit when the connection fails. So I can say something like process.exit just to make sure that the process is terminated, and we'll give this an argument of 1. So just something we can also do. So here I'll go ahead and save, and in the next video we're going to create the model for the invoice. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create the model. I will come here inside of my source folder. I'll create a new folder which I'll call models, plural, because there could be more than one inside of it. And then I'll now create a file, Invoice Model, VOICE, model.js. So now when we want to create a model, of course the model is going to be created on top of Mongoose. So we're going to bring in Mongoose, and then I'll destructure this schema and models from Mongoose. So here we're going to come and say const. The name of this model is Invoice Model. So Invoice Model. All right, and that's going to be equal to, now we want to create a new schema. Wow, this is plenty. It's giving us all these things just for free. Okay, let me not just use it. So you want to create the schema. Now this schema is going to have an object. Now the object will now contain the properties of your model. So for example, the properties of this schema. So for example, the invoice is going to have a name, which will be, a customer, an amount, a status, and then subsequently we're going to see other things. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'll come here. So maybe what I'll just do is, let me just add at least one property first, or inside this our model. So the property I'm going to add will be the amount, AMOUNT. Okay, I don't think amount, the first one should be customer actually. So the customer, and this customer is going to be an object. So here we're just going to say customer is going to have a type. So the data type of the customer will be object. All right, then is going to be required. So I'll have a comma here and say required, and I'll set that to true. All right, so this is going to be for the customer. Now, before I add the other ones, I'll just come here and add a comma, and I will now add the timestamp property. So I'll come down to the next line, and then I'll just have another curly braces where I'll now have my timestamp property. So timestamp plural, and I'll set that to be true. Of course, I'm sure you know what timestamp does. It adds the date of creation, and if you ever update this data, it will show you the date it was also updated. So that's what the timestamp does. So now that I've added this, I'll come down here and then I'll just export it. So here, the way I'll export it, I'll say const. I'll create a variable called invoice, because this is how we're going to reference this model. And then we're now going to say model.invoice or mongoose.model, and then we'll just point to this invoice and reference the invoice schema. Last but not the least, we're going to come here and export it. So I'll say export default invoice. All right. So let me close this guy up so we can see it up close. Now, one thing we can do to avoid some certain errors is that we can add a question mark here. So optional chaining. Somehow it avoids some kind of errors when you want to try to connect to and all of that. I don't know, but it does avoid some errors, and I don't want to wait to show you the error. So, but just do it like this, and this is how we need to set it up. So now we can now come here and add the other properties. So we're going to have the amount, and for that, I'll just bring in the amount. There's no point typing it out one after the other. So this is the amount. It's going to be a type of string. Set to true, required is true. Then what else do we need? Then the status of the invoice. In other words, is it unpaid or paid? So the status is going to be true. The default to be unpaid. Required is also going to be true. Now there's one more property I realized I added, but I have not even referenced it inside the original project, and that is the sent property. Now remember that we did send an email, and when we sent an email, we need a way to actually note that we've sent an email to this customer. So I'm going to save that inside this send property. So if I send one email, this will be incremented to 1. So you can know that, okay, I've sent one email. If you're sending another one, you know you're sending a reminder. So that's why I had this send property here. So I think after this, we just need to maybe format this guy and then save. And then in the next video, we can now go ahead and create the server action to actually create an invoice. All right, I'll see you in the next one then. Now let's go ahead and create the action to create an invoice, and that's going to be inside of our source folder. We're going to create a new folder which we'll call actions plural, because there could be more than one. And inside here we're going to say invoice action. Actions, is it actions? Okay, it could be more than one also. .js. Aha. So now in this invoice action, when you want to create an action, the first thing because this is going to be run on the server, the first thing you want to do is you want to say use server at the top. If you don't say this use server, you're just going to have all manner of error. So now that we've done this, we're going to create a function. So I'll say export and const. Now this function is actually going to be create invoice, because we're not getting invoice. We've not created an invoice. So create invoice, singular, single invoice. Okay. Now when you want to create an invoice here, we are going to need some data from the front end, which I'm going to have in this form data, and then I'll just destructure it. So here, what are we expecting from the front end? Well, we expect the amount, we expect the name and the status, and everything is coming from form data, but maybe not name, customer. So customer. All right, then okay, so AMOUNT. So now I can now come here and do my try catch block. So try catch. Aha. So in my try block is where I'll now try to so let's start with validation. So I'll say if there is no amount, there's no amount. If there is no amount, or there is no customer, I'm waiting for AI to help me, okay, or there's no status, then what I want to do is I want to return an an object that's going to have an error property. This error property will say, please, no, it's going to be a string. It will say, please fill all the fields, or whatever you want to do. Okay, so that's the validation we need to do first. Then, so once you've done this, let me format this guy. So once you've done this, you want to now connect to MongoDB. And personally, okay, well, it still works. We can leave it there. So what I'll do is I'll say connect. So no, you're not just going to say connect. You're going to say await, because connecting to MongoDB is an asynchronous function. So you want to say await connect. What's the name of that function? Connect MongoDB. And as you can see, we've also imported it. So if you go up, you see that import MongoDB from library MongoDB is fine. Okay, so we're gonna come back here, and now that we've connected to MongoDB, we're now going to create the invoice. So I'll say await await, and the function to create the invoice will be, we're gonna call the invoice model. So invoice, which we're importing, dot create. Now, what are the properties we want to create the invoice with? So customer one, then what else? Amount, then status. So those are the three properties we're creating the invoice with. Now, when you've created this invoice, you notice that whenever we create an invoice, automatically this list of invoices updates itself and adds the latest invoice. The way we do that is that we revalidate. There's a function in NextJS backend called revalidate path. So we're going to revalidate this data, and it will update itself automatically without refreshing the page. So it does that in the background. Now the function to do that is called revalidate. Come on, help me now. Validate path. Validate path. Yeah, so this is the function. So you're just going to revalidate path, and you will now specify the page where the data you want to revalidate is on. In our case, it's on the home page, so we're just going to specify the home page. Now we're also going to need to import this revalidate path. Yeah, so I'm trying to import it, it's not importing, so I'm just going to bring it in. It's from next cache. So if I scroll up, I'll just slot it in here. Revalidate path from next cache. Let me make sure that I copied this one well. Yeah, so I did it well. So immediately you revalidate that, you can now, return a message. So here I'll just say return, and it's going to be an object with a message that will say invoice created successfully. So let me just tap this one, and then I'll just say invoice created successfully. Yeah, so that's how you're going to create an invoice. Now in this catch block, what the problem is, what if there's an error? So how do we, maybe what I'll just do now is I'll just log the error to the console. So here I'll just say error. But this is not good enough. We need a way to intelligently pick out the error. You know why? Because sometimes the error can be in error.message. Some other times it can be in error.data.message. Do you get? So we need a way to, a function that will look in the various ways the error can be, either a string or an object, and then intelligently spit out the error for us. So in the next video, we're going to create a function that will get our error message. All right, so that's about it for this one. So like I said, we're going to create the function that will handle our error messages. So I'll just put it at the top of this, my file. So let's just come down here, and I'll say const, and the name of that function will be get, get error messages. Okay, if I can just type correctly, get error messages. Okay, so this function is going to, let's open it up like so. Now basically we want to check if the error is, has different data types. So but the first thing I'll do is I'll define a message variable, and then I'll now say if. So it's going to just be, let me just have the if structure. So it's going to be if, and then there'll be several else if. So we're going to have several else if conditions like so, and then we're going to have one more. So you know what I'll do, I'll just duplicate it. So that's 1, 2, and finally I'll just have an else statement, so else block. and then just open it up. So let's look at the conditions that we're trying to watch out for. So the first one is if we have this error that is an instance of error. So I'll just copy this guy and slot it inside like this. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to set the message to be equal to error.message. All right. Then the next one is if we have, so this one is a bit longer, so but I don't want to waste too much time. I'm just going to slot it in, and so here we'll say if there's an error and the type of error is equal to an object, and inside of that object we have a message property, then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say message inside here, message, and that's going to be equal to, now this time we're going to convert it to a string, so string, and then inside I'm now going to say error.message. All right, so the next one is if the error is a type of string. So if it's a type of string, then we're just going to display the error instantly. So error is going to be equal to error, else we're just going to say something went wrong. So here I'll just say message is equal to something went wrong. Something went wrong. Great. So that's it. Then last but not the least, we're now going to return the message. So here I'll just say return message, and this is the get error message. Now if you want to use this, get error message in like other actions, you can just say export. So that needs to be small letter, export, and then you'll be able to use it in other places. So instead of, let me copy it. So instead of just coming here and doing a console.log of your messages, you can just come here and return that error message. So I'll say return, and we're returning an object which has an error property, and we'll just say get error message and pass the error. So that's it basically. So in the next video, we are now going to call this action from the front end of our application so that we can create an invoice. All right, I'll see you in the next one then. All right, welcome back guys. Now on the front end, we're going to call the action we created, and for that we need to be inside of our page, and that is the create invoice.jsx. Good. So before we do that here, I want to import my two hooks, so the use router and the use search params hook. So the reason why we are importing this is because we are going to need them. So let me come down here, and I think at this point we can start collapsing these guys. So first off, I will create the variable, so const, let's do router first, then we'll do use search params. Now why did I bring this use search params? Well, because if you look at the original project, when we want to edit an invoice, when we click this guy, right, it will add this parameter, ID parameter, to the URL. So that's exactly why I brought in that use search params hook. So here I'm going to isolate that ID. So I'll say const ID, and that's going to be equal to search params dot get, and I want to get out that ID from the URL. All right, so since we have these two guys in place, we can now come down to the onSubmit function. So this is the onSubmit function here. Now in the onSubmit function, I'll say first of all, if there is an ID, then now inside, if there is an ID, what that means is that you want to update the invoice, because for there to be an ID here, it means you clicked here and you want to perform the update operation. So I'll just add a comment here because I'm not ready to update the invoice, but I'll just say update. Now it's in my else block that I will now create the invoice or create a new invoice. So to create a new invoice, right, we need to, like I said, we need to call that action. So I'll say const, and we need to make sure this is asynchronous. So here we'll say async. All right, so here we'll now say const response, and that's going to be equal to await, and the name of the function is create invoice, and make sure you import it as well. Now when we want to create an invoice, we need to send the data. So I'm going to need to create a form data object. So let's do that at the top here. Okay, this one can come up. So here I'll say const, and I'll create a form data object that's going to be equal to, so basically we just need the amount, so amount. All right, then we need the customer now, but we don't have that customer yet, so let's get the customer based on the name. All right, so for me to get the customer based on the name that is selected here, so for example, if the user selects this name, I want to be able to look inside the customer array and get the object that has that name. Do you get? So if the customer select this name, I want to get this object, so it's this object I'll save. So I'm going to come to this guy here and I'll say const customer. So now we're going to now go through the customers.find. Okay, so it's already giving us this, so customers.find, and basically we're looking for the customer.name that is equal to the name that is selected by the user. So here I can now come here and say customer, and that's going to be an object, so add a comma, and lastly we're going to add the status. Now eventually we're going to need to add a property called the ID, so I'll just say ID, and in this ID here I will say that if there is an ID, then I want, so we're going to use ternary operator, I want to send that ID, else I want to send an empty string. Okay, and this ID is for when we want to update, but for when we want to create a new invoice, we just need these 3 pieces of information. So here we're now going to say response await create invoice, and we'll now pass the form data that we just created. All right, when we do this, well, what I want to do is I want to log the results to the console so that at least I can see on the front end. Then I will now handle the possible responses. So here first I'll say if there is an error, right, I don't want to alert this guy, and I'm going to make this, I'll add my optional chain in here so that just in case it doesn't, you know, hang my whole application. So here I'll say if there's an error, then I want to use React Toastify to toast that error. Now we've already installed React Toastify, it's part of the template that we used. Let me just show you, I'm trying to look for it. So this is it right here. Okay, I can't find React Toastify, control find. Oh, okay, so for some reason I can't find React Toastify here. So what that means is that we need to install it. I'm sure I installed it now, haba. Okay, but anyway, let me just install React Toastify. So npm React Toastify, and then just do that. Okay, so just come here and just copy the command. So the npm is a very popular package, so copy that and then just create a new terminal and then install it. Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and then you just need to, I'm looking for the documentation, you just need to import these 2 guys into your layout file. So if you go to the app has a layout file, so it's inside this layout file. I'm just going to import my React Toastify. I honestly thought I imported it earlier. I think maybe I did it later on and I forgot to bring it here. So I'll just put this inside of the body and just like so. So just by doing this, save, I'll be able to use React Toastify in any place in my application. I just need to import toast. So I'm going to copy this guy and come back to my create invoice, and then I'll say toast. So it needs to be toast dot error, and you just want to basically toast the error message. So here I'll now come here and say if we have a response.message instead, then I want to toast that message as well. So yeah, so don't forget we need to import this toast. I don't know if it's auto import. At some point it wasn't auto importing, but okay, still not auto importing. I'll try and figure out why, but you just need to come up and make sure you import the toast. So I don't need this, I just need the toast. And that's it. So at this point I think we can go ahead and test our function. Why am I feeling like I'm missing something? I'm not sure, but let's just test. So I'm going to come here. Okay, so I'm going to come here and click on create. What's going on here? So it says await isn't allowed in a non-async function, but I did make that function asynchronous, if you remember. So I said async, then here I said await. So what seems to be the problem is this not where you put the async again. Hey god. Okay, so I figured in my onSubmit function I have this closing curly braces which isolated this other part from, you know, the function. So let me just format this text. So if you look at it now, it's supposed to start here and end here. All right, let me just give some space and save, and now we should be able to test without any errors. So if I come here, click on create invoice, I select a customer, select an amount and click submit. Aha, so you see loading and invoice created successfully. So to confirm that we actually created an invoice, I'll just look inside of MongoDB and click on browse collection. It should open up that collection and at least we should see one piece of data. So if you click on invoice, you should see this. Yeah, so this is it right here. So in the next video, we are now going to start working on the option to list the invoice on the page. All right, so now before we work on the function to list the invoice, we needed to close the form, the pop-up. That pop-up, we needed to close it. So in this my else block, after I've checked for the response, I'm just going to come here. First of all, I'll empty the form. So I'll say form.reset. Then I will now close the form. I'll say set open to false. So tap that, and then I'm not going anywhere. So I'll just remove this one. So that's the only thing we need to do. So if we create the form now, if we create an invoice now, that form will close after we're done. So now let's come back to our actions and let us collapse this guy. The next function we're going to create will be to list the invoices. So maybe what I can do to save time is that I can just duplicate this guy. So Ctrl C, and then I'll just come to the next line and paste it in. All right, of course we're going to change almost everything here. So I'll say get invoices plural because we're getting more than one. Now this is not a regular function to just get something from MongoDB, like you know, because here we're going to need to paginate our data. So the way we get it is quite different, and we also want to be able to search. So what I'm going to come here to do is I will remove all of this because we don't, okay, and I'll change this to params, search params, or whatever you want to call it, but I like calling it params. And okay, so here we're gonna, where am I? Oh, okay, so I think I need to remove all of these checks. Okay. Okay, so here we'll come here and we'll specify the params or the parameters that we want. So the first is, I'll say const page, and this is going to represent the page number. So what I'm going to do is I will say params.page, and if we don't have this parameter, then I'll just say the page should be 1. Now just to make sure that this is a number, I'll say parse int, not parse float, parse int. So even if what we send is not a number, this will make sure that it's converted to a number. So that means I'll just cut this params, Ctrl X, and slot it inside here. So the page is the first parameter we need. Then next we need the limit. So const limit, and the limit is going to be params.limit, or it's going to be 10. So this limit simply stands for the number of data you want to send per time. So in our own, we set it to be 5. 1 2 3 4 5. If you click next, it will show you the next 5. So but if we don't have this, then we're going to set it to be 10. So here we're now going to come here and create the next one, which will be skip, and this is gonna, we're now going to take this page and say -1 and then multiply it by the limit. So what this means is that when you click on page 2, how many, let's say you have 10 items in your invoices, you have 10 invoices in your invoice array. When you click on page 2, what will happen now, it will skip the first 5, right, and go to the next 5. So from 6 to 10. That's what this skip means, and this is how you calculate how many items you want to skip when you're making a request. All right, so after this is done, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create something called a query, and it's going to be an object just as you see here. And let's open it up. Now what is this query going to represent? Well, it's going to represent this, everything that comes in this search, right? if I type, for example, a name, it's going to be able to search both the customer name, the customer email, and other things here. So that is going to be the query. So we're going to start by saying something like, okay, I'll come here. Okay, let me just let AI help me. I'll come here and, okay, since AI is taking time, I'll just say dot dot dot. This is the spread operator here, and sorry, escape. So I'll open parentheses here. Great. And the first one, I will now say params.search, params.search, SEARCH. Okay, then I'll now say and. So you know what I'm going to do, just to make this a bit neat, I'll just bring this to a new line like so, and then instead of saying text here, I'll say or. Just follow me. This is a method in MongoDB, so I'll say or, and then here I will now specify the properties. Now this or, it's not going to be an object, it's going to be an array. So inside this array is where we'll now specify the various scenarios we want to search for. So the first one now can be something like, let me just do tab, escape. So the first one now can be something like, I want to search for, let's say, the amount. So how much, like if I come here now and I put something like 50, it's going to search and give us every amount that has 50. So that's because I've added this amount here, and we're using regex to look in the params.search, and we're saying that we want it to be case insensitive. All right, so amount is the first one I'm doing here, but we're going to do others. So the next one will be status. So I'll just duplicate this guy and change this to status. So it's going to be able to search the status. Then we're going to do two more. So let's duplicate this one. Now this time we're going to search for the customer name, and because the customer is an object that now has a name property, we're going to put it inside this quote, customer.name. It's not just going to be customer.name, it's going to be inside the quote, and then we're going to now have this. Then last but not the least, we also want to search, oh sorry, Control Z, we also want to search for the customer email. So we're going to change this to email. So just by doing this, we've built out this query such that whenever we try to search, it will factor in all of these when it's performing the search. Of course, let me format it so that it's a bit neater. So you see, query, search params, and then we just added all of these parameters inside of it. Okay, so now that we are done with this one, what we need to do next is to now come inside our try catch block. So we want to await, we'll connect to MongoDB. Then let me remove this one. So I'll now say invoice.find, and I'll put it inside the variable. So I'll say const invoices, because I'll need to send it to the front end. Invoices is equal to, so here I'll now say invoice.find, and then I'll now say query. So the query is the argument, this query here is the argument with which I'm using to find the data. Then we're now going to add the skip and the limit property. So I like to put it in the next line like this, and this one in the next line so that it's readable. Okay, so we find this guy and then we skip, then we add this skip that we added here, which is like skip the first 5. Then limit is per time you're searching just whatever is sent from the front end, or 10. So you see what we're trying to do here. So now that we've done that, let's come down here. Now we're going to calculate the total items that are found in this using this query. So the way we do that is I'll say const total is equal to await invoice.count documents. So I just want to count how many documents are here. So this guy has how many documents? Let's say 5, 10, whatever. After that, I'm now going to come here and create another variable which is called page count. I thought it was helping me just now. Okay, so total pages, but I'll change it to page count. Page count, and then it will now be math.ceil, and then total divided by the limit. So this is the page count. So now we have 3 pieces of information we want to send to the front end. The first is the actual data, which is in these invoices. The next is the total number of items in these invoices. last is the page count. So are we on page 1 or page 2 or page 3? That's what we are doing. So now that we've done all of that, I'm just going to remove this revalidate. We don't need it here. And I'm just going to return this data to the front end. And of course, it's not going to be like this. So here, I'll say, you know what, let me just remove this one. So here I'll say return, and then I'll say JSON.stringify, because I want to convert everything to a string. And let's open it up. So first off, we're returning the total number of items. Then we're now returning the page count. Okay, next we're returning the invoices. Now that invoices, I'll just set it to, I'll just say data, and then I'll just point to the invoices. So this is how you create the function, or sorry, the function to get the invoices that is paginated. And you see how we'll now use this information. Let me format it. You see how you now use this information in the front end to get paginated data. All right, I'm hoping there's no typographical error anywhere, but if there is, we're going to fix it. So I'll see you in the next video then. All right, so now in the previous video, we've been able to create the server action to get the invoices. Next, we need to call this action from the page. And remember, this is server action. So I'm going to call it inside of this, my component, which is the server component. Yeah, so which is the server component. So what I'll do is I would first of all show you something. So if you come and look at this finished project here, you'll see that in this URL, we have this query page is equal to 1. And if we do a search of, let's say maybe 50, or my name, Zeno, if we do a search of Zeno, you will see here page is equal to 1 and search is equal to Zeno. And then of course it now affects what is shown on the page. So we need to factor in this, and they are called search params. So inside of this component where we want to fetch the invoices or get the invoices, we need to call we need to reference this search params. And this search params, you can just, you know, access it whenever you're using a server component. Like you don't need to import anything. Once you just put search params here, the page already knows what you are trying to do, that you are trying to get the URL parameters here. So since we've done that, we'll now come here and define two search params, and the first is the search, and that's going to be equal to search params dot search. Okay, so maybe I'm just going to query this one. I'll say dot search, and if I don't have anything, I'll say or an empty string. All right, so that's the first. Now the second one is going to be let me just duplicate this one, and then I'm just going to change this to page. So this will change to page, and the default is going to also be set to an empty string. So now that we have these two parameters, and these two parameters, like I said, they are what you see here on the URL. So now that we have the two parameters, the first thing is you need to make this function asynchronous. So I'll come here and say async, like so. Aha. Now we can now come here and then fetch the invoices. So here I'll just say const, and to make it simple, I'll say response is equal to await, and what's the function? It's called get invoices. That's the name of the function. So, and don't forget to import it from the actions page. And then I'm just going to bring this one to the next line. So as far as the search and the page is concerned, we're getting them from these guys here. But then there's one more thing we need to add, and that is the limit. So if you remember, if we come back to our server actions, you discover that one of the, so page limit, and then the params.search, which is this one, params.search. So those are the three things that we need to send with the, you know, request. So here I'm just going to come, I'll add a comma here, and then I'll just come to the next line and say limit, and then I'll set the limit to whatever I want. In this case, I'm going to set it to 5. All right, so that's it. Now that you've done that, one more thing though, you're not just going to log this response to the console. Now if you come here, when we returned this response, we converted it to a string. So we said JSON.stringify, and then we returned these pieces of data. So now when you get this response, you need to convert it back to an object. So the way we do that is you say const, and this is just JavaScript. So const, I'll say invoices, and that's going to be equal to json.parse. And then inside of this, you're now going to pass your response. All right. So if you just want to be safe, you can just say, or just make an empty array. So this is how you can make that a request to that server action, and then you can just come here and log the invoices to the console. Now we've actually written a lot of code and we're not testing. So if there's an error, that's not a problem. We're going to fix it. So, but then I'm going to save this file and we are going to see if it's successful. We should be able to see our invoices in the console right here. So maybe I need to refresh the page, I think. So let me come here and refresh the page. And unfortunately, we got an error. So json.parse, that means we're not getting the result that we expect from the back end. So what I'm going to do is, instead of, I'll come back here. So instead of doing this, I'm just going to comment this one out. So control / and then I'm just going to log the response to the console. I'm thinking maybe it has something to do with, you know, the access of the MongoDB, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just going to refresh the page so that I'll actually see the error that's logged to the console. Okay. Sites cannot be reached. Oh, my internet. So it really was my internet that was acting up. So if we come back to our code here, we can now uncomment this one out and hold on and change this to invoices. Okay, so now if we go ahead and save this file, what we will see in the console will be like this structured. Oh, it's not showing complete, but you get the gist. So this is the invoice. Let me refresh it again so that it will load again. So this is what it looks like. So it has the total, the page count, and the data. This data is where we now have the array of invoices. I think we only created one, but we can create a lot more. So now that we've been able to get this data, what we need to do is we need to pass this data. Let me just do it right now. So I'll come here. So we need to pass this data right to our list of invoice, these components here. So I'm going to start by passing it to, in fact, I'll just separate the components. So here I'll say total, and I'll set that to be invoice.total. Then we're now going to do page number. So page number, and that's going to be invoice.page number. Okay, so invoice.page count. Yeah, so it's actually page count. Then last but not the least, we'll now pass the invoices, and that's going to be invoices.data. So we're passing these three components to this list invoice component. So these three props. So now let me open this list invoice guy and receive the props. So if I come here, I want to get the total, the page number, and the invoices. Now these invoices, I'll rename it to data because I just want it to be generic. So, but just to be sure that we've gotten what we want, I'll just do like this, and then I'll just say total, yeah, and then I'll save. If you come back here, we should be able to see list invoices and the total, which is 1. Do I need to refresh the page for every change I make? Oh, I've not saved this one, I'm sorry. So I need to save this one. And now you can see invoices total. So if you go ahead and create another invoice like so, or maybe John Doe, and then you say invoice of 100 or 200 or whatever, and then you click submit, you see the total immediately changes to 2, which makes sense. So in the next video, we're now going to, you know, build out the table and everything that will just be displayed on this list invoice page. All right, I'll see you in the next one then. Okay, so we're going to start building out this list invoice component from top to bottom. So I'm going to start from here, and for us to do that, I need to come to the list invoice component. And what do we have? So I'll just remove everything we have here, and then I'll just open this guy up. No, like I said, I want us to build. So there are 2 sections here. This first section that contains this number of invoices and the search, and then there's the table. So what we'll just do is, let's just come here and say let's just create a div, and this second div, we'll just assume that this is the table. So this one is the table. Let me just say table here because we're not creating the table yet. So let's start with this one. Now this guy is going to have two components. The first one is just going to be a simple paragraph. Excuse me, Control Z. The first one is just going to be a simple paragraph, yeah, that will say the number of invoices. So in our case, we'll just say total. Okay, so total and then space invoices. Yeah, so that works. Then last but not the least, we're now going to have a search component. So what I'll just do is I'll just add, for now, I'll just add another P and say search, because we don't have any search components here yet. We're going to create that. So here, I'll now say, okay, flex between, and this is a class I created to do flex between. Then I'll put a border at the bottom of 1 pixel, and then lastly I'll give it a border color, so border dash gray, and I'll set it to 400. Okay, so if we go ahead and save, we should be able to see at least, okay, so you see 2 invoices and then there's the search. Let's add some padding on the bottom here. So here I'll just say PB-3, and that should just, add some space here. So what we should do now is let's create this search component, since like we need it for us to be able to, proceed. So I'll come to my widget, because the search component is something I want to be able to use in multiple places. So I'll just come into my components, and then I'll go to the widget folder. So this is the widget folder right here, and then I'm just going to say search. So let's create a search.jsx. Now this is going to be very straightforward. We're going to use some things from shardcn. So first, let me do rfc to create the search component. So what are we going to do here? Well, look at what the search component looks like first. So there's this icon inside of it, and then there's the search. So first off, we're going to have a div, and that div is going to contain two things. The first is going to be a search component. Okay, so I'm thinking how I structured it earlier. Okay, so the first is going to be the search component. Now that search component is from React icons, but of course I would not want to waste your time to go and start looking for it. This is the search component by search. We're giving it a class name of absolute. We're positioning it. Okay, let me just come here and put relative first. So I'll say class name, and I'll set this to relative, and let me just remove all these classes. I want you to appreciate everything that I'm doing. Okay, so after this search, which I'm going to import, it's not importing automatically, so I have to bring it in manually. So let me just bring both the search and the input. So this input is from shardcn. So I'll just come down here and just, reference the input from shardcn. So tab, good. Now the input is a type of text. It has a placeholder of search. It has a class name. So for the class name on the input, we are just adding a padding left of 8 pixels. Now before we add the padding left of 8 pixels, let me just save this guy. Let me save this guy and then come and display the search component here. If I come here and replace this search with my search component, all right, and I need to import it, so import it and save, we should be able to see something that looks like we've not imported. Okay, so it's telling us we've not imported something, but I know we imported by search. So it just dawned on me that I have not actually installed React icons. I don't know how that's possible, because in my mind I felt like I'd installed React icons. So anyway, let me just create a new tab here, and then I'm just going to say npm install and React icons, and then hit enter. In my mind I felt I'd installed it, that's why so but we'll install it and everything should work fine. And let's come back here in our search, and here, so here you see we have this search icon, and then we have the placeholder inside. Now what you want to do is you want this search icon to, okay, I think I pasted in some classes. Sorry, these classes were not there before. I'm sorry, let me just remove it. So these classes were not there before. Let me save it now. So if you save it like this, then if you save it like this, this autocorrect is just so invasive. Then you see that the search icon is outside, the input field is just below it. So what you want to do is, we're giving this one a class of relative. Now I'll now come here and give this one a class name of absolute, and then I'll say from the left I want it to be 2, then I think 2 is like 8 pixels, yeah. Then from the top I want it to be like half from the top, then I'll now translate it to center it and all of that, give it a text color of gray. But I think I used, okay, text color of gray is perfect. So now if you go ahead and save, then you will see that it will be positioned inside this one. Now another thing is this search is overlapping. So what you want to do is here you want to give this one a class name and set a padding left of 8. So that will push the placeholder a bit. Then okay, then I think maybe you just want to just give it some other classes. For example, you want to specify that you want the text to be, so I'll just say color -dark, even though I don't think that's super necessary. Then I'll just leave it like that and save, and then we should just have this search like this. So you see it has moved this search component here. So I think the last thing we need to do is to now, you know, define the what's it called, the placeholders, sorry, the props. So we're going to need the value prop and the, of course, the onChange prop. So I'll say value onChange, then maybe I would also add the default value. So here I'll say default value, aha. So that those three, now those three now have to enter this input. So we're going to come here and say that the value will point to value, and then the onChange to onChange, default value to default value. Then if you want to take it a step further, you can even set a placeholder. So for example, I can now come here and say I want to also have a placeholder prop, and then instead of hard typing the placeholder here, I can just reference that prop. So I'll remove this guy and say placeholder. Simple. So now we're good to go. We've created the search component. We're not going to use it now. The next thing we're going to do is to create the table. Now to create the table, I'm going to work with the table components in shardcn. So if you go and you scroll down to T, you should see the table components. First off, let's import it, or let's install it. So I'll click that guy, and then I'll just come and paste that guy in and then hit enter. It's going to install the table component, but while it's doing that, we can just go ahead and copy an example. So I think this one works. I'll do like this. I think I can just go to the code, because I want to just copy the import statement first. Then, so let's go back to our list invoice. Let's bring in the import statement. And what else do we need? Then we now need the table itself. So here, okay, this is an example. So, but I don't need the example. I'll just go straight to the point. So I'll just copy the entire table like so, yeah. And then I'll just come and slot it in here. So instead of using this div, I'll just put the table directly. Okay. So let's see what we have here. We already have access to the data that we want to render on the table, which is this one. So let's just correct some things. So what do we have? This is the table. Okay, I think I'll just go straight to the table row. I'll remove the table caption. So table header has table rows and then invoices. Okay. So we're going to start here and we're going to say serial number. So S/N, that's for serial number. Then what other distance? So we're going to have customers. Then we're going to have email. Customer plural, because it's a single customer. Then here I'm going to remove this class, and then I'll change this to amount. So that's amount, that's fine. Then we'll hit next, we'll have data. Then next we're going to have status. Then last but not the least, we're going to have action. So there's quite a number of items here. So these are the items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that we need. So now let's come inside this guy here, the table body. So now initially in the table body, they were mapping through these invoices, which is incidentally what we are trying to do as well. But we're going to change as to data. So I'll say data.query.map, and I'm going to represent every item inside as an, okay, let's just leave it as an invoice. I shortened mine to say IMV to just keep it short, but since they've already done this for us, I'll just leave it as an invoice, but also I want to have access to the index. Okay. So next we have a table row, invoice.invoice. Nope, this table row is going to have an index of, hold on. So I'm just going to remove it and just reference the index, or you can say invoice._id, whichever one. So invoice, you know what, I'm going to shorten it because I may have to type too much. So I'll just say inv. So here you can say inv._id. All right, so the first item we have here is the serial number. So I'll just remove this one. And we're just going to say the serial number is index plus 1. So index, which is 0 based, plus 1. Yeah. What else do we have? What's the next thing we have? I think the customer. Now look at how we display the customer. So first we display the image and then the name beside the image. Now to display this image, we're going to use something in ShadCN called an avatar. So if you go to ShadCN and you look for the avatar component, this one, so we're going to get here. So this is it. So I'm just going to go ahead and install it with npm. Come back here and say install. Then I'll come back here and just copy it. So very simple component, but what it does is very fantastic. So if you have a, hold on. So if you have an image, it's going to display that image. But if you don't have an image, you can have a fallback. That fallback can now be a text. So for example, if the user's name is Zeno, the fallback can now be the first 2 letters ZI. So we're going to see that shortly. So I'll copy the avatar, come back here and just come up and slot it in like so. Then I'll now come here and grab this component itself, and let's come back here. And so this place where just after we have, let me space this out a bit. So just after we have the index, this next one will now be for the avatar. So here I'm going to remove everything you have inside here, and then I'll just spread it out. Now remember, the avatar has an image, and then the name of the customer is beside the avatar. So what I'm going to do is I'll put it inside a div, which I'll give a class of flex-start, and maybe I'll say, okay, so dot space -x of 2. That will just add a space between the name and the image. Then I'll now paste in the avatar. Okay, let me put it inside a span. So the first span will contain the avatar. Let's format this. Now what's the URL for the image? So we're going to change the source. The source is going to say so it's going to be invoice query.customer, and then query.image. Come on, just say .image. Okay, and we don't need an or because we have a fallback, so just point that. Then the alt is just going to say something, anything, so image. Then the fallback will now be the first 2 letters of the user name. So here I'll say, okay, here we're using 1 letter, but if you want to use the first 2 letters, you can say invoice.customer.name, right? Then you can now say .slice, and then you can now specify that you want to start from 0 and you want to slice the first 2 characters. So it will just give you the first 2 letters of the username. Then after that, we'll now display, so in another span, I'll now display the username itself. So inv invoice.customer.name. All right, so after we're done with the username, I think the next thing we have is the user email, which is going to come here. I'm trying to space it out so you can see what's going on. So here I'll just say something like invoice.customer.email. So that's it. Then what do we have next? I think this is the last one. Let me remove this table cell. Okay, so after the customer email, I think what we have next is the amount. So here I'll just say invoice.amount. Then what do we have next? The date it was created. Did I put that? I'm not sure. Data. No, this is date. So the date it was created. So after amount, we have date. So here, now for us to get the date, we're going to, normally the date is like, let me just, the format of the date is like, let's say 2004 or 2024 dash, you know, just numbers. what we want to do is we want to convert that date for it to display like this. So this is a readable date, July 15th, 2024. So we're going to use a package to do that, and I think the name of that package is datefns. Datefns. So if you come to Google and you say datefns and say npm, it will show you the package in npm. So this is it. Now all you need to do now is to install this package. So if you click on copy and you come here and you paste that in, it will just install the package for you. Okay, good. So now that you've installed that package, you need to use that package. You need to use the package to format your date the way you want. So I'm going to come here first and I'll import the format from datefns. So I'll say import format from datefns. Then I will now be able to use that method. So how do we use the method though? So what I'm going to do is I'll come down here to where we have the dates. So after the amount, we have the dates, and then I'm just going to remove everything you see here, and we're now going to say format. Oh, it's even helping me complete it. So watch this. I'll say format and new dates. Now, what dates do I want to format? So invoice.created@, and then it's giving us this format. But the format I really want is to have the month. So I'll say MMM. So that's for months. Then DD, that's for the date. Then comma. Then YYYY, that's the year. So that's how I want to format it. And all of this is in their documentation. So after you formatted it, what's the next guy we have? I think that is the status. So allow me to duplicate this guy and just remove everything we have here. So here I'm just going to say status. So invoice.status. However, this status, I want to display it inside a component itself. So you see we have either blue or red. So in ShardCN there is a component called badge. So if you just come here and you install the badge, so I'll copy that, I'll come here and paste it in. So install the badge, and now we can use the badge. So instead of just putting this guy here, I can wrap it around the badge. So I'll come here and say badge. Sorry. What's going on now? So badge, and then I'll just wrap it inside. Now don't forget to install the badge or to import the badge from UI badge. Then this badge now will now give it what's it called, a variant. So I'll say variant, and this variant is supposed to be dynamic, because when the status of the transaction is paid, we have a different color as to when it's unpaid. So here inside the badge, I'll say that, look, oh okay, I think we made a mistake here, sorry. Okay, now this is it. So I'll say, look, if the invoice okay dot status is equal to paid, then I want the variant to be not success but default. Default is blue, DEFAULT. Else I want it to be destructive. Now these classes, they are coming from ShardCN. If you've used ShardCN, you know that destructive is red, default is blue. Default, okay? So that's it. Now if I format this guy and I go ahead and say, okay, there's one more thing, actions. So now for the actions, we're going to have another table cell, Control C, and hold on, where does this one end? Here. So I'll put this table cell here, and then I'll just say edit. So I'll go ahead and save, and let's come and see if we've done everything the way we're supposed to. So give it a couple of seconds. Perfect. So here, ouch, I hope I'm not restarting this system. So here you see we have this data, but we have these two at this last column here, which we don't need. So you just need to scroll down a bit and we need to remove it. So the table footer, we don't need the table footer here. So I'll remove it and then I'll save. So if you come back here, you see that we just have the table displayed here. So in the next video now, we have to work on this edit icon and the, what's it called? Delete functionality. Or I think maybe we should just work on the pagination first. So in the next video, we're going to work on the search and the pagination. Then last, we'll now work on the other icons. So I'll see you in the next one then. Okay, so what I want us to do is I want us to work on the pagination first, then the search is going to come next. So for that, we're going to need to install a package called React Paginate. Now, before I install that package, yes, I'm going to, okay, let me not just go ahead of myself. Let me just install the package. Let's do it one after the other. So I'm going to come here and I would paste in the command to install the package. And then I'm also going to bring in, so this is how you import it, React Paginate, Control C. Let's drop it at the top here. So let's bring in React Paginate. What else do we need? We need the Paginate component itself. So this is how you use it like normally, but we're doing it a different way. So what I'll just do is let me just bring in this React Paginate component. This is what you need. So I'll copy this guy and then I'm just going to come here and bring it in. I'll drop it at the bottom of this table. So after my table, I'll come here and maybe I'll just say, first of all, make sure that data.length is greater than 0. Then if that is the case, then I will display my React Paginate. Now, of course, there's a lot about this React Paginate that I'm going to change, but I just wanted to drop it here first. So after we've done that here, the next thing is we need a way to get this params in this component. So page and search. And because this is a client component, the way we get it is quite different. So let me just make this a client component, all right? Because we're going to have on clicks, use effects, and all of that. Now, the way we get it, the search params in a client component is quite different from how we got it in this server component where we just said search params. You know, we just destructure this prop and say search params and we're able to get it. Here, we're going to use a hook and the name of that hook is use search params. So here, I'll just bring in that hook. Okay, let me collapse some of these guys. Okay, so I'll just bring in the hook and we need 3 hooks actually, but one is use search params, use path name, and then use router. You're going to see how we're going to use all of them. So, but first, let me come here and just, you know, reference them. So like I said, the first one, let's just do one after the other. So const router, let's just create router, and that's going to be equal to use router. So that's the first. Then we're now going to have the path name as well. So I think I should just bring them in since, I mean, it's just defining them. So path name is going to be use path name. Then, okay, then the search params as well. So here, I'll just bring in the search params. So I'll say search params is equal to use search params. Good. Now, we also need a way to be able to monitor the page count. For example, this is page 1, and as you can see here, we also have page 1. So we need a way to be able to monitor it. I'm going to create 2 variables. So the first one I'll call page count. So const, and I'll just say page count, and then I'll just say set page count. My AI is not working again. Page count. That's going to be equal to use state, and let's just open that up. Let's make sure we import use state, I think. Okay, good. Now the next variable we're going to create for monitoring the page, we'll say const, and we'll call it current page, and that's going to be equal to, now in this one we're going to use our use ref hook, and then let's just set it to 1. So the current page initially is going to be set to 1. All right, then the page count also initially we're going to set it to 1. Don't forget to import useRef from React. So these are all the variables that we need when it comes to pagination inside of our application. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come down here, and so what I want to do is let's have a use effect. So I'll say use effect, and like so, let's open it up. And I don't know if I'm faster writing without AI, but AI helps a lot. So what we'll do here is that anytime the page loads and the total number of items on the page is greater than 0, in other words, there's at least 1 item. So for every fresh page load, like if I refresh the page now, it's going to reload the data and, you know, display it on the page. So I'm saying that every time there's a refresh and, you know, we have new data, I want to set the page count to whatever the page number is. So here I'll say if we're going to use the total number, so I'll say if total is greater than 0, all right, then I'll say set page number, sorry, set page count. No, this is not what we want. Set page count to page number. So hold on, there's something wrong here. So we have 2 of these. Okay, so what is this page number? Well, this page number is what we get from the request. This page number here, which we get from here. So see, page number invoices.page count. Yeah, so we are setting this page number to the page count, right? So that's basically what we're trying to do here. So I say if total is greater than 0, set page count to page number. So here I'm going to come here and say page number total. So whenever the page number changes or the total number of items in our array changes, this will be fired. So but this is let me just come here and say, let me add a comment here and say pagination, and pagination start, so that we can at least know where our code stops. So now we'll now create a function which we're going to call handle page click. So here I'll say function, and the name of that function is handle page click, and let's just open it up like this and like so. Now this function here is what is part of, let me just collapse this table so that I don't have to scroll too much. Now it's part of this React page init. If you look at it, it's already there. It says handle page click. So basically what this is that anytime you click on these guys here, this is the function that will be fired, this handle page click. So let's just come here to the function and we're going to give it an E, so event, and let's open it up. All right, so the first thing is we want to say const params, and the params is going to be equal to new, so new URL search params, and then we want to just say search params. Well, you can convert it to string, but it's not really necessary, but anyway, to string is still fine. Then we're now going to come down here, and these params, basically we're just saying we want to get everything, all these parameters here, so both including page and search, but what we're interested in is page. All right, but these params now is going to get everything in the URL search bar, this variable here. So now that we have that, I'll now say come if, hold on, no. So I'll say if current page, now this current page, it has a current property, so dot current, which is the actual value of the ref. Then I'm going to say params dot set, and I want to set the page, and the page will now be e.selected, and I'm adding 1 to it. So where is this e.selected coming from? So if you scroll down, whenever this function is fired, right, whenever this function is fired, it's going to send an event object with this function to this function. That event object is supposed to contain the page number. All right, initially that page number is of course set to 1, sorry, it's 0 base, so it's set to 0. So we are saying that whatever we get as the page number, we want to add 1 to it. So for example, if the page number is set to 1 and we come here and we click on next, it will just add 1 to it. Do you get what's going on here? So when we do that, the next thing you want to do is you come to the next line. Then I will now set the current page. So here I will now say current page, sorry, this should be current page dot current, and that's just going to be e dot selected, and then I'm adding 1. So remember here we're setting the params, and the params is the one that is on this URL. Now we're now setting this current page, to the same thing we're setting in the params. Then last but not the least, we'll now replace the route. So here I'll say router.replace, not router.push, replace. And so path name is going to be everything here except this search params. Everything here except the search param, that's the path name. So I'll say path name and then query params, and then I'm just converting it to string. So basically what we are doing, let me just do a recap so that it's clearly understood. So what we are doing here is that whenever you click on either next or you click on something here, this function will be fired, this handle page click, and this function will be fired with an event object. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you by logging the event object to the console. So I'll come here and say log the event object to the console. So aha. So I'm logging the event object to the console, and you know what I'll do? I'll just take it a step further to comment this entire thing out. So I'll comment this entire thing out just to show you what that event object does. But for that to work, I need to add some classes, because if I save this guy now, you're not going to see it displayed well. So I need to add some classes to this guy here, and I already have those classes. So let me just look for them and bring them in. So this is break level next. So I think I just converted this to capital letter. Then page to be displayed, page range display, I think I set mine to 3. Then page count, yeah, this is going to be prev so that it's not too long, prev, and then it's just going to be prev like so. Then this is going to be next, just going to be next. Then aha. So now I'm just going to bring in the classes and some other properties. So I'll just come here and slot it here like so. So basically these are the properties I slot in. The margin pages display, I'm setting it to 2. Then the container class name, basically these are just class names that I've created inside of my globals.css file. So I'm just setting it here. So now if I go ahead and save, we should be able to see it displayed somewhere here. Do I need to refresh this page again? Okay, so I refreshed the page and we have this guy here, but the only thing is we don't have up to 2 pages for us to actually click and test. So what I'll just do is I'll just enter 4 more invoices so that we can have at least 2 pages. So let's do that quickly. So I've entered up to 6 data, so we now have 2 pages. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to click on page 2 and watch what happens. So remember, what we are trying to do when we click on this page is we're trying to log the event to the console. So if I click on page 2, it logs selected and the value is 1 to the console. So even though we're on page 2, when we click on it, what is being logged is 1. So if you want to reference this page, you need to say selected event.selected plus 1 so that you can get 2. Do you understand? So it's 0 base. If you click here, you're going to see selected 0. Great. So that's just what I wanted to point out to you. So now I will come back here and then we can now proceed. So if I comment out this one, it now becomes better to understand or easier to understand, because here, first of all, we get the search params, which is the entire thing in the URL. Then we now say, look, set the page property in the search params. So if you come here, this page property, we are setting it to event.selected, which is, you saw what we just did, plus 1. Then we are also updating the current page to the same thing. Last but not the least, we are now replacing the URL to the path name. And like I said, the path name is everything except the search params. Then the path name and then query the params. Do you get what we're trying to do here? So that's exactly what we just did. So whenever you click on this search, this button here, it will replace this page to whatever you select here. That's basically what we just did. And when it replaces the page to whatever you select, by replacing this guy here, we're now going to fire off the HTTP request again to the server. Okay, so that's basically what we're just trying to do here, nothing more. So I'm just going to go ahead and, save the entire page. And if we come back here to the page we're currently working on, if you click on page 1, okay, it's on page 1. If you click on page 2, you see here it has changed to 2, and it has also gone to the second page. So that's basically what we're trying to do, and it's as simple as that. So in the next video, what we're now going to do is we've been able to add these page params. We're now going to add the search params, such that every time you also type something here, it will automatically update these search params and search for that document. So I'll see you in the next video. Okay, now let's work on implementing the search functionality. So what I'm going to do is, first off, let's bring in the state that will handle that. So I'll just call that state search, and we've already imported use state, I think. Yeah, we have. So I'm going to scroll down here and let me collapse. Oh, maybe I'll need that one. So I'll scroll down here and I'll look for the search component, and then I'm just going to give it the value prop that's going to be set to search. The onchange is going to be set to set search. Then last but not the least, the placeholder. So placeholder, and that's going to be set to, let's just say search. All right. So I'm going to leave out the default value for now, and then I'll just save. So let's save this guy. And if we come up here, we need to have a function that will be fired whenever we type into the search bar. So what I'll do is I'll just put it below this one, and I'll call that function const. The name of the function will be handle search. Help me. Okay, so it's an asynchronous function, and we're going to open it up. Now it's going to be actually very similar to what we did here, right? It's going to be very similar. So you know what I can do? What I can do is I can just copy everything we did here, because we are still working with the params, the URL params. So I'll just copy everything we did here and slot it here and just tell you what is going to change. So first off, we have this params, which is pointing to the URL search params. Yeah. Now, whenever we attempt to search for something, one of the things I want to do is I immediately want to set this page to page 1, because we're getting new data. So we want to get new data and we want to get the first page. So here I will come down after these params. I'll say, look, please do my, okay, I think I've already done it here. So I'll just copy this one, and then I'm just going to come here and say params.set page, and I want to set it to 1. So I will remove everything you see here and just set it to page 1. Follow me closely, okay? Now, after you've set that to page 1, then you want to now, so here, instead of saying if current page, here you want to say if search. If search means that if there is at least one character here, in other words, if this search is not an empty string, then we want to do something. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to say params.set. This time we want to set the search params, and we're going to set it to whatever the value of our search is. That's this one. So here I'm just going to come here and say search. But we also need an else statement in this case. So else means whenever this guy is empty. So for example, if I had something inside, like maybe Z, if I delete it and it's empty, that's what this else case is going to handle. So I'm just going to duplicate this one, and this time I'll say params.delete. So delete, and then it's just going to be search. This time it will just remove this search params entirely from the URL search bar. So after we've done these two things, the next thing we need to do is just to replace the router. So I'll just remove this current page stuff here, and then I'll just say router.replace and path name, and then I'll also display the params. That's the function to handle the search. Now, however, we need to monitor the search state, and we need to call this function every time the search state changes. So for that, I'm just going to have another use effect. Let me just tab my way through, and then I'll just say handle search. So every time this search changes, this function will be fired. It's that simple. So let's go ahead and save, and I think we can try it out. So I'm going to come here. This is the page I'm currently working on, and then I'm just going to search for my name, Zeno. So let's do Zeno. As you can see, page is equal to 1 and search is equal to Zeno, and then it's automatically just displayed only Zeno. There is a problem, however. The problem is that you see this function here, it's fired on every keystroke. So if I come here and I type something, it's fired. That function is fired. If I delete, it's fired. If I like so, on every keystroke, you are making an HTTP request to your server. That's not what you want. What you want is that whenever you type here, you want to give maybe like 1 second or 2 seconds. So if I keep typing, when I stop after like 1 or 2 seconds, it will now make the request to the HTTP to the backend. So the way you do that is you can actually just come here and just do a set timeout, and then you have to do clear timeout every time. But I think there's a, I don't know, will I say a cleaner way? I don't even know how to, I don't know how to say that, but there's a package that is called use debounce. So let me show you. Let me just come here and say use debounce npm. Now this package will help us do exactly just that. So let me just open it up and then just want to show you. So this is it. So I'll just click to install, and it's a pretty popular package. Look at it, 1.2 million. So you can rely on it for your big project. I'll paste it in and then install, and let me just show you how it works. So basically you're just going to, first of all, you're going to, okay, so this is use debounce, but what I want is the use debounce callback. I think we have it somewhere. So look at it, debounce callback. So we're going to import use debounce callback, right? I'll come here and bring it to the top and just import it here. So after you've done that, you can now come here and just copy this one. I think I'm trying to look at it twice just to be sure. It's not looking very arranged, but this is the essence of what we need. So here I'll just copy this guy, and then I'm just going to come here. After our function to handle search, yes, I'll just come here and paste it in. So here I'll say debounced, I'll just add handle search, debounced handle search, and then let me just remove some of the things we have here. So remove this, and I'm also going to remove this, which I don't need. Let's remove this, and then let's see if we can format the entire thing. Okay, we don't need a value as well. So maybe I'm just trying to arrange it so that it's clear. Okay, so let's do like this. Aha, so this is a lot better. At least it looks a lot cleaner. So this is what the use debounce callback is like. So it's just like a regular callback. It's just like a regular callback. Maybe what I can do is I can also just bring this here, then I'll bring this one here. Aha, perfect. So in this my debounced handle search, I'll just come here and copy everything that is here, and I'll just copy it, and then I'll come here and paste it in. So paste it in, and then what does this 1000 mean? This 1000 means that after, it's the delay that, you know, after you finish typing, it's going to delay for 1 second before it fires your request. But maybe I'll just leave it at 500. So at 500 millisecond after you've finished typing, it will fire the request, so that it doesn't take so much time. So now, instead of calling this handle search, what we want to do is we want to now call this debounced handle search. So I'll come here, I'll paste the debounced handle search here, and then this is what is going to be fired. All right. So that's it. And if you're using TypeScript and you're getting, I don't think you should have any problem, but I'm just going to go ahead and save, and then I'll come back here. Now the difference is that it's not going to make the request on every keystroke. So for example, if I say Zeno, it's going to wait 5 seconds, 500 milliseconds before it searches for that. So that's the difference between, you know, just, you know what, let me make this a bit longer. So let me just say something like 3000. So just to show you, you know, that it's actually taking that long, except we have a cache. So if I say Zeno, you see, so it took a little bit longer. So, but what you want is, you just want maybe 1 second or so, I don't know. Save, and then I just come here, Zeno, and after 1 second it will search. So that's it. That's what we have for today in this section. So in the next one, we're going to work on the edit and the delete. I'll see you in the next one then. All right, welcome back, guys. Now we should work on these actions. So the send email, edit, and delete. So we're going to start by installing a package called RC Tooltip. So if you copy this RC Tooltip and you come to, okay, let me show you what it does. So what it does is that when you hover on this, any of the icons, you see there's a text that describes what that icon is going to do when you click on it. So that's the work of RC Tooltip. So I'll come here, I'll paste it in, and then I'll hit enter. So while that is, installing, let's just come to our invoice and scroll down to where we have the actions. So here I would expand the table and then come to my actions, which is this one here. So in the actions, first off, you want to have a span. So I'm just going to add each of the actions inside the span. Meanwhile, there's something I forgot. For the RC tooltip, you need to import this RC tooltip, and then there's a style that comes with it. Apparently, I can't find it here. So it should be somewhere. Let me just check. Okay, look at it. This is the style. So you need to import this style, and then you also need to import tooltip from RC tooltip. So what I'll just do to just make my life a bit easier is I'll just bring it in from the original project and just slot it in and show you. So let's just come up here, and then so you want to import tooltip from RC tooltip, and then you also want to import the CSS file, which is exactly what I showed you here. This is the CSS file. Good. So once you've done that, you can now come back here and we'll just put the icons here, each of the 3 icons. So first off, I will come here and scroll back down. Aha. So we created a span for the icon. So this is the first span. Now inside of this span, we're going to bring in the tooltip, and I really want to show you how it's done. So you're just going to say tooltip and wrap it around anything you want, to do. So here, maybe what I'll just do is I'll just copy this tooltip because I want to show you, and then I'll just come here and paste it inside here. All right, so let's format, and so placement is going to be set to, is there any, I'm trying to remember if I did anything on the placement. So the placement is going to be set to top. So top, that's where you want the text to be displayed. So for example, if you see it's on the top. So top, then the trigger will be on hover, then this overlay will now be the text that is displayed. So for now, I'll just leave this one as send email, because that's the first action. So inside of this tooltip now is where we can now slot in the icon. But before I slot in any icon, I'm going to duplicate this guy. How many times? 3 times. So 1, 2. So we have 3 of that. Now because there are 3 inside here, we're gonna need to give this a class name of flex so that they are displayed side by side. And I'm just gonna say flex and space x of 3, and that's it. So now the last but not the least, we just need to put in the icons. So these 3 icons, 1, 2, 3, needs to be inserted in each of them. So what I will do is I'll just bring in the icons and see if I can auto import it. So inside this first tooltip, is that the first tooltip? Yeah, I'll paste in this icon. So this is the mail icon, and it's supposed to call this function, but I'll comment that out because we're not working on that yet. Then the second one is the edit icon. Now for the edit icon, I'm going to wrap it around a link. So what that is that if you click on this guy, it will go to it will change the link here. So that's because we wrapped it around a link. Let me cancel this. So for the edit icon, I'm just going to say wrap it around a link and give that link a href of /id, and then point to the invoice._id. So this time you need to import the link. So import, it's not importing automatically, but we'll do that later. Then last but not the least, we are going to create something called a delete modal. So that will come like maybe, I think in the next video. But if you click on this guy, there's this modal that shows up. Maybe I should just do it now, okay? So, but in this last one here, I would just come here and say delete. And then I'll just go ahead and save. Of course, I need to import the link. So let me just do it at the top. Hold on. So here I'm just going to say import, and it's link help me from next link. Okay, so go ahead and save that, and we should be good to go. So, oh, I didn't import the icons, so sorry about that. So let me quickly do that. So my icons are right here. So the first one is the mail icon. So I think I've imported the both of them right here. Then if I go ahead and save, everything should be fine now. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to work on this delete modal, and I think I'll just do that right away. So some time ago we worked on an action modal, and the action modal and the delete modal, they're actually very similar because they are both alert dialog boxes. So what I'll just do is I'll just right click and copy this action modal, and then I'll create another component which I'll call delete modal.jsx. So I'll paste in this action modal inside, and then I'll just change the title to delete modal. Now this component is a reusable component, mind you. I just wanted to point out that now this this delete modal is not going to need a lot of things. So we're going to remove the trigger, we're going to remove the set open, the open, and then we're just going to change this button text to pass. So pass is just for a short form for password. All right, so these four guys are what we need. Now as far as the trigger is concerned, we want the trigger to be this delete icon. So we're just going to save ourselves some time, and then we're just going to bring in a trash icon from Font Awesome. So replace the trigger here with this trash icon. Of course, I'll remove this component and format it. So what you see here now is so this is the trash icon inside. Make sure you import the trash icon from React icons. Then what else? So the title is going to be coming from here. The description is going to be coming from here. Then what else do we need? So now we're going to create a variable which we'll call keyword. So here I'll say const and keyword. I think it's just one word, and let's allow AI to complete it for us. So set keyword. Make sure you import useState from React, and make sure you convert this to a client component. So come here and say use client. Use client. Good. So now where does this keyword come into the picture? Well, first off, I would modify some of these things. So for this alert description, wait, do I need a description in this thing? Okay, maybe I do. Okay, so for the alert description, after the alert description, I'm going to come down here, and then I'll just add a paragraph tag. This paragraph tag will just say to delete, type pass, and this is the pass. So whatever you want the pass to be, you can decide whenever you're using this component. If you want it to be a keyword that just says delete, then just put it so into the input field. So what that means is that we also need an input field just below this guy. So here, so here I'm just going to bring in the input field. Okay, so copy the input field and slot it in here. Now this input field, we're giving it a border of red. Is the placeholder will be keyword, and then it's going to now, the value and the unchanged will now be pointing to this our keyword here. So that's the input field. So if you remember, if you click on this guy, it shows you, say, to delete, type the delete keyword, and this is the input field. Okay, so that's just what we're trying to achieve here. All right, so let's keep going. Then so we're not going to show, it doesn't have any children, so we're getting rid of the children. So in our footer, we'll leave this cancel, but before we show the action keyword, which is going to be the delete keyword, so on click, and here we're just going to say delete. So we'll remove this button text and say delete. So before we show this delete button, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the keyword, which is what is typed into the input field, we want to make sure that it's equal to what we say we want the password to be. So by just doing this, the delete button is only going to show if what is typed into this input field is the same thing you set here. That's all. That's what we're trying to do here. So by just this simple component, now we can reuse it in multiple places. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it, and then I'm just going to reference it inside of my list invoice component. So let's come back here and see what's going on here. React.child blah 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 single. Okay, I think maybe the problem here is these texts. Hold on. Maybe this delete text was the problem. I think I'm just thinking out loud. So let me see if I can say delete. So we have a span. We have 3 spans. Is it supposed to be like up to 3 spans? I think maybe we should have just one enclosing component inside of it. I'm not entirely sure, but let me just wrap it with a fragment. Right now I'm not sure of anything. I'm just trying to survive. So after the last span, is it table cell now? No, it's the last span. Yeah. So let me just save that. I just want to be sure that everything is in order. Okay, so that was the problem. So I wrapped it with a fragment and everything is fixed. So you see this delete keyword here, we're going to replace it with our delete modal. So that's going to be very quick because I'm just going to come here and say delete modal, and just make sure you import it while at that, and then just bring it. So here we're just going to set the title to delete, title, come on now, and that's going to be set to delete invoice. Then the description will be, are you sure you want to delete this invoice? The pass will be, so now what we'll now set as the pass, initially we set it to just the keyword delete, but you can now like take it a step further and set it to, oh, there's really nothing we can set it to because we did not set a title. So I think we'll just go with the keyword delete. But if this invoice had a title, like maybe payment for something, you can now reference that here and set it as invoice.title. But since it's just the biodata of the user and the amount, except maybe you want to use the amount, I don't know. So, but I'm just going to leave it like this. Last but not the least, we've added an onClick, and the onClick just says delete this invoice. Now, maybe what I'll do for this one is that I'll just say on delete, so that if you want to reuse this component in several places, you can just, use the same name. So for the on delete, I'm just going to come up here and just create a function, which I would also call on delete. So function, and the name of that function is on delete, and then I'm just going to open it up like this. Basically, for this function, I'm going to say just say ID, because it's the ID we are sending, and then I'm just going to log that ID to the console. So log and ID, and then save. So here I'll come here and do F12. Come on, don't save my time, please. Oh, okay. So we copied this alert dialog, but we're not using this open and set open again. So let me just go to the delete modal and just remove these 2 guys here because we're not using them, and then save. And I think that should be the end of all our problems, at least with this particular one. Come on, save my time. Oh, inputs. Now we did not import input. Sorry about that. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. So import it and save, and that's it. So just like that, we have this guy, and if we click on it, it should show us this dialog. Now what I'm going to do is I'll just type the keyword delete, and then I'll click on delete. You see here that it's logging this delete keyword to the console. So we are almost ready to go. So in the next video, we are going to build out the server action to actually delete this invoice. I'll see you in the next one then. So my people, let's start working on the function to delete, because I feel like it's the easiest function. And the function to update is like, I don't know, but let's just come to our actions, our invoice actions, which is located here. This one, I think we're also done with this. Okay, So we're going to come to our invoice action, and it's faster if I just duplicate one of the ones I've already worked on before. So I'm just going to copy this one. I'll come down here and paste it in. And I am going to, hold on. Okay, maybe I should not just clear everything. Let me just, okay, trying to see what I want to do. Okay, I'll remove this one. I'll remove this one as well. And then I'll change the name to delete invoice. It's a very short function. So delete invoice. And here what you want to do is you want to get the ID. So whenever this function is called, or whenever this action is called, we're going to send the ID of the invoice. So here in our try block, we're going to connect to MongoDB, and then we'll say invoice dot find by ID and delete. So find by, come on, help me out, by ID and delete, and then we're just going to delete it. Okay, and just keep it simple. Then there's nothing to, okay, we're going to revalidate the path because we are mutating the data. So we revalidate the path, and then we send a message that says invoice deleted successfully. This is it, very short and simple. Now, because this video is so short, I'm going to just head over to the front end, which is in the list invoice, and then I'll just, write out the function to delete this guy. So on my delete modal, I'm calling this on delete, and I'm sending it the ID, so that we are good. So what we just need to do now is to come here, and so just like we've done before when we wanted to create an invoice, we're going to do the same thing here. So I'll just copy up to this one. I'm just doing this to save time, okay? And then I'll come here and paste it in. So my on delete, I'll paste it in, and then responses await. This will now change to, this needs to be async, excuse me, and then this will change to delete. So you want to make sure you import it as well. So delete invoice, and what we are sending is the ID, so not the any form data, the ID. And then basically we are logging the result to the console. We're saying if there's an error, we toast the error. If there's a message, we toast the message. I'm not sure if we've imported toast here, but I think, I'm not sure. So here I'll just say import. Okay, so import, come on, just help me now, import toast from React Toastify. Good. So I'll just go ahead and save that, and then I'll just try to delete one of these invoices. So I'll come here, let's delete the last one, which is by Zeno. I'll click this guy, and then I'll type the, okay, the delete keyword is already there, so click delete, and as you can see, it's gone, and now we have John Doe. So that works. So in the next video, we're now going to work on the function to update an invoice. That will involve this one, to involve this one. All right, I'll see you in the next one then. So now let's go ahead and update an invoice. Now we've done it such that when you click on this button, it's going to go to this URL that has this search param, so the ID, and then it will list the ID. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the actions, the invoice actions, and we're going to create two pieces of action. So the first one will be to get an invoice. That's to get a single invoice, and it's going to be very straightforward like this one. So let me just duplicate this one down, and then I'm just going to say get invoice. All right, so we're going to get the ID of the invoice, and then we're just going to say invoice.find1. So here I'll just remove this guy and say invoice maybe find by ID. Really, find by ID still works. So find it, and then we're not revalidating anything. We just want to return this invoice back to the front end. So I'm going to convert it to a string. I'll say JSON. Hold on. So JSON.stringify, and then inside of the stringify here, I will now, okay, you know what, I need to assign this one to a variable. So I'll say const invoice, and that's going to be equal to, let's see, let me spell it completely. So here JSON.stringify. So what do we want to stringify? We want to stringify the invoice. So I'll just say invoice. Yeah, so I'm sending it back to the front end. Yes, so this works. Then this will help us to get a single invoice and populate the form with the data. However, what we need is to update the invoice, right? So I'm just going to duplicate this one more time. All right, and then I'll change this to update invoice. Okay, so now when we want to update an invoice, it's just going to be very similar to the creation process. So we're going to have the form data that will have all the details about the invoice. So if you go up here and you see this function to to create an invoice, this data, you're going to need it. I'll copy that, and then I'm just going to come back here and slot it in. So the only additional data that we're going to need is now the ID. Okay, and remember, we're also sending the ID when we create an invoice. So if you go back to your create invoice component, in our form data, you discover that we factored in the ID, but now we're only using the ID in the update process. So we're bringing it in here. So here in this one, we will now say await, then find by ID and update. So and update. So this time you want to delete this guy, and you specify the ID that you want to check for, to find first. Then you now specify the data you want to update. So this time I just want to update the amount, and I'm not updating the customer, the amount and the status, because the customer has already been set. You cannot be changing the customer after you've set the invoice. So I want to update the amount and the status. Then I want to send a message to the front end that says invoice updated, or maybe, you know what, okay, so invoice updated successfully. Then revalidate path. So we're revalidating because we are mutating the data, we're changing the data, so we need to revalidate it. So this is the function to update the invoice. Now with these two pieces of function, to get the invoice and to update the invoice, we can now go to the front end side and update our invoice. I'll see you in the next one. All right, so now let's work on the functionality to edit an invoice. So for that, I'm going to go to my create invoice page, because everything is still going to be in the same page. So maybe I'll just come down here, right, and I'll just do a use effect, and then let's open this use effect up like so. Let's add the dependency array. So now what I'll do is, you know something, when you click on this edit icon, what will happen is that it will add this ID params here. And you remember we already gotten the ID params. So let me show you. So this is the ID params. So what I want to do is I want to monitor for that ID param. So here I'll say if we have an ID, then I want to set open to true. And when open is set to true, it will show the modal. So I'll come here and say I want to monitor the ID, and then I'll save. All right. So here, let's come here. Aha. So you see, ID is true, modal shows up. All right. So, but when we click cancel, right, what we want to do is we want to return this URL back to the state without the ID. So we want to remove the ID entirely. So just to keep things a bit clean, what I'll do is I'll just duplicate this. I'll just come down here, and then I'll say that if whenever the the modal is closed. So here we're just going to say if the modal is not open, then I want to, go back to the original route. So here I'm just going to say router dot push or dot replace, and then I just want to go back to the original route. So of course here I'm just going to come here and say open, and maybe add the router. Aha, and that's it. So here if I go ahead and save and come back here, so you see we have the modal, but when we click cancel, okay, let me do that again. I'll click here, we have the ID, but when we click cancel, it takes us back to the original URL without the ID params. So that works. So but what do you want to happen when you click on this modal, right? You want to populate this modal with the content of this invoice that has this ID. That's what you want to do. So that's where we get to use the get single invoice ID function. So here I'll come here and click and create a function which I'll call const fetch invoice, or maybe fetch invoice, and that's going to be an asynchronous arrow function. Now inside of this function, right, what we want to do is I'll just say const response is equal to await. Now this time we're not creating an invoice, we want to get an invoice, and this get invoice we need to import it from our actions. So when we get the invoice, whatever the response is, we want to, okay, so here I'll say const inv, and then remember we sent a stringified response. So here I'm just going to say response dot parse, sorry, json.parse, and then I just want to pass the response. Okay, so when we do this, we can now come here. Oh, sorry, what's going on here? So after we do this, we can now come down here, and then we can now take the data from this invoice and set it to the form. So the first is going to be the customer name. So we're going to say form.setValue, we want to set the name, and it's going to be invoice.customer.name. Then the second is the amount, and last but not the least, the status. So this is how we're going to go ahead and set up everything, right? So now you want to call this fetch invoice function when there's an ID. So we set open to true, and then we call that function. So if all things are correct, or all things being equal, we should be able to populate this guy here. So let me click cancel, and let me try another one. Oh, sorry, not delete. Okay, so something is definitely wrong. We need to just figure out what it is, because it's opening this guy but it's not fetching the invoice. So let's figure out what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'll just do a console.log of the invoice. So I'll say inv, and then I'll save. Now we can now come here and check what we're getting in the console. So let me cancel this guy, clear this one up, and try it again. Aha, so we are getting null here in the console. So what is null? So let's go look at the function and troubleshoot. So here we say get invoice, we connect to MongoDB, we say invoice.find by ID, and then we find this ID, and then we say return json.stringify. I'm not seeing anything wrong here, honestly. I'm not seeing anything wrong here. Okay, but okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'm going to log this invoice here in the console. I just hope it's not my internet, but let's just log the invoice and see what we're actually getting. So I will open up my console, and then I'll just maybe try this again. So here, click, and then let's see what we have. Okay, so we're not even getting anything here, and I don't seem to know why. Wow, what seems to be the problem then? Okay, let's go back to the first principles. Let me log the ID. So I'll do a console.log. I want to make sure the ID is getting to this back end. So I would say ID, I'll add a comma, and then I'll just log the ID. Okay, let's start there. First principles. So I'll cancel this guy, and then I'll just click this one. Aha. So let's come back here and see if we're able to get the ID. So it doesn't look like we're getting any ID. So I think that's where the problem is. We're not getting the ID in the back end. So let's come back to the front end and see what the problem is. Okay, so we forgot to send the ID with this one here. As you can see, there's no ID here. So what we need to do is we just need to reference the ID, and that's it. We'll be able to get it now. I don't know how I missed that, but sometimes it happens. So let's try it again, and I'll click this one. And as you can see, it has populated. So we have 100 here, and on paid, the only thing we're missing out is it's not selecting this customer. So let's just go to see why it's not selecting the customer. So this is form.name, So let's see the default value. The default value is name, I think. The form schema rather, it's also name. So there's no reason why I should not select the name. Just set value name, invoice.customer.name. Okay. I'm failing to see why it did not set the name, except in the form field here. I just hate troubleshooting on live video. So here we have default value. We should also add a value, I think. So value, and it's just going to be set to field.name as well. So value is equal to field.name, and I think that should fix the problem. Aha, so you see we have John Doe. Perfect. So now we can get the data. The next thing we need to do is when we click on this button, it should update that data. All right. So I'm going to come here inside of this function, and we've already done much of that already. So let's collapse this one, and then inside of this function, remember we said this function for on submit, for when we submit, we said that if there is an ID, we added a comment update, but we didn't do anything inside of it. So now is the time for us to do something with it. Okay, so I'm going to copy everything we have at the bottom here. I'll copy it, and then I'll just come here and slot it in. So slot it in and make changes. So here, instead of create invoice, we're going to say update invoice, and we need to import it. So import it. Aha, so all of this will still apply. We don't need to change any other thing but this. So I'm going to now come down here to the button. So in the button, instead of me to still say submit, I'll come here and say, look, if there is an ID, so let's make it dynamic. I'll say if there's an ID, then I want to say update invoice. Sorry, I made a mistake. If there's an ID, then I want to say update invoice, else I want to say create invoice. So if you save that, then what you're going to see here will be update invoice. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually change this to paid and update. Aha, so you see immediately it changed to paid. There's one thing I probably need to do, and that is to change the class to, I think I set it to default. I don't know why it's not, but let's just look at it again in the list. So I said, I think it's this one. Yeah, so I said if it's okay, this needs to be capital letter paid, then default, else destructive. So if you save that, we'll now have it blue and this other one red. So just like that, we've been able to update the invoice. Let me try to update another one. So maybe this next one. Oh, sorry, this one. Aha, so Jane Doe, maybe I'll just set it to paid as well and update. And as you can see, it's also updated. So what is left for us now is to send an email when we click on this button to the user. So we're going to send a dynamic email to the user. All right, I'll see you in the next one then. So assuming you wanted to send an email, a dynamic email to your users, the first thing you need to do is you need to have an email client. That is the service with which you can send the email. So I'm going to come to Gmail, and if you click on the Gmail icon, you can click on manage your account. When you do that, you will be brought to this page where you can just search for app. So if you search for app, you should see something that looks like app passwords. If you click on that, it will show you this page where you can now create apps that you can use to, send email. So an example would be to say something like invoice, maybe small letter, invoice. Or okay, so invoice manager, so something like that, and then I'll click on create. When you do that, it will generate this password for you. So what you need to do now is you need to copy this password, right? Of course, you know your email, so you copy the password, and then you come, okay, so I have this .env.example, so you want to paste the password here. Of course, you want to remove the spaces, so make sure you remove the spaces. Okay, so now what that means is that you need this email host, smtp.gmail.com. You need the email user, which is your email, this email you just generated the password from, and then you need the password. So these three variables are what you need. Of course, what I'm going to do obviously is I'll delete this guy. I just wanted to show you. So eventually I'm going to delete this guy. I'll just click on done, and I'll just delete it so that you don't use my Gmail. Okay, so I've deleted it. I'll use something else. But now you know the process. So what you can do next is we're going to come here, and in our actions folder, so make sure you have an actions folder. In the NextJS action folder, we want to create the email action, all right, plural.js. Of course, in the email actions, very similar to what we did in the, hold on, let me just close some of these things. In the invoice action, at the top here, we're going to just get the use server and slot it in there. Now, to send an email, we're going to use the package called Mongoose. And to create the email template, we're going to use a package called handlebars. So what I'll just do is I'll say npm install, sorry, not Mongoose, node mailer. All right. Then I'll give it a space and say handlebars, plural. And that should do it, and then I'll just hit enter. I hope I spelled the handlebars correctly. I think I did. So it's handle bars. Yeah. So once these two packages are installed, we can now go ahead and work on this guy. So what am I going to do? So first off, I'm going to import the node mailer and the handlebars. All right. So I'll copy them here, and then I'll just come here and install and slot them in. So I'm importing node mailer, I'm importing handlebars. Okay, great. So now let's come down here and create a function. So I'll say const, oh, I need to export it obviously. So export const, and the name of that function will be send email. So it's going to be asynchronous, and when we want to send an email, let me just open it first. So when we want to send an email, we're going to need some basic information. So things like the subject of the email, you're going to need the message, but for now I'm not going to use the message. I'm just showing you generics, the email you want to send that message to, and some form of data. So I'm going to come here. Now this data is going to be dynamic. So when this is out of the way, what we can now do is we can go ahead and now follow the regular node mailer process. So first of all, I will create something called a transporter, which is what you see here. So we're going to say transporter equals node mailer dot create transport, and then first of all we're going to specify a host. And okay, maybe I should just let it help me. So the next one should be a port, and next one should be secure, and next one should be auth. So this is our transporter. Of course, there's one thing I'm missing here, and that is the fact that I want to change this to service. So I'm just going to duplicate this guy, and instead of having host here, I'm going to change this to service. So what service do I want to use? And of course, this is going to be changed to Gmail. And then what else? Here the host is going to be host is which email are you sending from. So we're not going to say SMTP here, we're going to say process.env. So this is going to be dot, and then we'll say email host, email underscore host, and then of course this user is going to be email user, because that's what we saved it as in our env, and then this will be email pass. So we shortened everything. So now this is what our transporter should look like, and I think I used 587. Yeah, that works. Okay, sometimes you may have to turn this off, this true. You may have to comment it out if it's not sending locally, but I don't think you should have any problem because I did not. So after you've created your transporter, which ends here, you want to come down to the next line, and you want to create something called mail options. So here I'm just going to say mail options, and you just specify the details about what you want to send. So from has to be from your user's account. Then you want to send to the email. The subject is going to be subject, and the HTML will now be the message itself. So here, for example, we're getting the subject, the message, the email. So it's only this data now that we are not using, and this data is what we want to be dynamic. So but no problems. So we've created the mail options. After you create these mail options, the next thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and send the email. So here I'm just going to come down here, and I will say await. No, I don't want to await anything. Okay, well, I guess we can. So we'll say transporter.send mail. Now we're going to send the email with these mail options, but I don't want to end it here, right? So what I want to do is I want to add a comma, and I want to add a callback. So function in my callback function, let's see, was it helping me out? Okay, so in this callback function, we're using the arrow function syntax, but I think, hold on, I think I'm already used to the regular function syntax. So function, and then here I'm just going to say error, err, and info. Aha, then I'll just open it up. So here you just want to say if there's an error, well, you want to log the error to the console so you can see what it is. Then else you want to just log the info to the console. So here I'm just going to add a comment here and say email sent. Email sent. Great. Now this should work, yes, and I don't think I need the await here. Okay, I do need the await. Now this should work normally in your local development, but one thing I notice is that sometimes on Vercel it doesn't work. It works normally when you are on the local development environment, but on Vercel it doesn't work. So if you've ever experienced that kind of problem, what you need to do is you need to wrap this guy around a promise. Okay, so let me show you how you're going to do that. So I'm going to tap this guy and I'll say await. Let me just give some space. So I'll say await, and I want to create a new promise. All right, and here this promise is going to, of course, it's going to have the resolve and the reject. Hold on, I want to put it in the same line. Resolve and reject. Okay, so now we can now use the arrow function syntax to open this guy up, and because we already have the await here, I'll remove the await keyword here, and then I'll just take this one, Ctrl X, and just wrap it around this guy. Ctrl V. Now let's format it. Control format. It's not formatting. Okay, obviously I've missed something. Oh, okay, what I missed is I'm not supposed to wrap this around. This is supposed to be parenthesis, not curly braces. I made a mistake there. Okay, so yeah, so this is perfect. So now let me format it. Now, so we are awaiting, we create a new promise with resolve or reject. Now, if there's an error, then we want to reject. So here I'll just say reject error, and then if there's no error, we want to resolve. So I'll say resolve and info.response. So that's it. Okay, here I also want to log the info.response. Yes, so this is it. This is how you send an email. Now what I'm going to do is, for now I'm just going to leave it as is, and then I'm just going to try to send a simple message from the front end. After that I will now create the template just to make sure it works, just initial testing. So I'm going to save this file and I'll head over to my front end, which is in my list invoices. So in this list invoices here, oh, I still need to work on the back end. So in this list invoices here, what I want to do is, you know what, let me just come to the create invoice. So no, the invoice actions rather. So I'm going to create another function here in my invoice action, and I'll call that function send email. So here I'll call the function send email. Now you may want to ask me, why am I creating a send invoice function here? Why can't I just call this send email directly from the front end? All right, why can't I call it directly from this list invoice.jsx? That is because list invoice.jsx is a client component, and we're going to be using handlebars and node mailer. There's a component of node mailer that is going to throw an error when you try to run it directly from a client component. So I think that's the problem I encountered. So that was why I just created the server component here. So let's see how we're going to do that. On a second thought, I feel like what I should do at this point is not to even do any of this, but to first test that the email, this send email function is actually working. That's what the first thing I should do. So what I'll just do is I'll just come to my list invoices and let's locate display. Okay, so I'm going to uncomment out this one, send this invoice. All right, or maybe just say send this invoice. And then I'll just go up. I wanted to change the name of that function, but I think it's okay. We can just leave it like that. So here, let me just duplicate this one and just change the name of this to send this invoice, Ctrl V. All right. So what I'll do here is I'm going to change this function to await, send email, and of course, you know, the send email function is taking three parameters. So the subject, the message, and the email you want to send to. So in this case, I'm just going to send to this email. Okay, so I'll send to this email, and that's it. I'll just log the response to the console. Is there any other thing I want to do? At this point, I don't think there's anything I want to do. I'll comment out these ones and then I'll save. So if I click on this button, I expect this function to be executed. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just do a console.log of a keyword. So I can't do console.log because of handlebars. So console.log, and then I'll just log a keyword that says sending string. Okay, so now let's go ahead and save, and I will come here, open my console, and let me try to click on this button and see what happens. So okay, so something is wrong. I think I did not import the send email, so let me quickly import it and save again, and let's try it again. So I gotta come here and do send email, and you see it says sending, and last but not the least, okay, so when it comes to the response, I'm getting this undefined. I don't know exactly what that is, but I will come here. Let me check the console if there's anything in the console. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the console as well, but I think I'll just check my email to see if there's anything there. Okay, perfect. So in my email here, I'm getting the email. So if you open this guy up, it says this is an invoice and the subject is invoice. So what that means is that our send email function is working. The next thing we need to do in the next video is to create a template with which we want to send our information. All right, so I'll see you in the next one then. All right, so now we want to wrap this thing up, but there's just one thing I want us to do before we proceed to create the email template. You notice that when we sent this email, we did not get any message. There was no way we could know that we had actually sent the email. So what we can do is, instead of just, you know, sending this email in this transporter here, what we want to do is we can do a try catch block. So for example, I can come here and say try catch. So let's do a try catch block. And of course, let me just handle the catch block first. So in the catch block, I will just return something. So just like we normally do in all of our functions, I will return an object that has an error property, and the error will just say email not sent. All right. So in the try block, I would also return, I would also return something, but this time it's going to say message, and of course it will be say email sent successfully. All right. Okay, so now that we have our try catch block, we can now take this process here that, you know, sends the email. I'll cut it and slot it inside my try block, so just above this return statement here. So let me just do like this, and then I'm just going to paste it in. So that's what you need to do to actually get a response. So if you save that and you try to send an email again, you should be able to get a response. Of course, in the list invoice, you need to comment this one out. Excuse me, you need to comment this one out to handle the error. So handle the error and the message. So here, if I come here and try to send an email again, it's going to send, and then I'm also going to get email sent successfully. Great. So the next thing we want to do now is we want to build the template. So for us to build the template, I'm going to come here to this email builder. It's usewaypoint.com, and it's an open source package, which means it's free. So this is the URL, and I'm just going to click on open playground. It's going to open this email builder playground. And the interesting thing is that you can start from scratch by clicking on empty, and then you can just start by, you know, the plus icon, add a heading and all of that. So you can add a heading and then select what you want to say, maybe Xenotrust, and then you can just come here, add something else, maybe some form of text, and say, and you know, click here and say welcome to Xenotrust. Whatever you want to do, you can add an image. If you click here, you see these are all the things you can add to create your email template. But what I'm going to do is I'll just click on one of the templates here. So I think I can't remember which exact one I used. I think is it e-commerce? No, it's not e-commerce. It's subscription receipts. Yes, this one is what I used. So I don't want to waste too much time. Okay, like I'm just going to leave a lot of it as it is, but you can actually delete and replace the components. I just want to show you how you can add dynamic content here. So what I'll do is I'll just click here and it will just show me the price. So this is the price here. Now supposing you wanted to impute the price from your email, all you just need to do is to add double curly braces, opening and closing curly braces, and then just come here and say amount. So I'm going to name my own variable amount. All right, then maybe I'll just also want to add the name of the user. So here I'll just highlight this one and I'll say receipt, I'll say invoice 4, and then I would also do like this and say name. So anytime you wrap a variable along inside of double curly braces, you can add this variable when you want to create the template with handlebars, and we're going to see that shortly. So maybe I'll just keep this a little bit clean and I'll just delete all of this. So I think if you click on it, you will see, hold on, I'm trying to look for the option to delete, but I'm not seeing it. Okay, if you click on one, you will see, oh, okay, because my browser is shrinked up. So if you click on the entire thing, you should see this delete icon. Aha. So I'll just send this simple one. And at least the most important thing is that you know how to add dynamic data. All right. Now, after you're done customizing your email, what you need to do is you need to click on this HTML output and just copy it. So if you just click on it, you can just do Ctrl+C or right click and copy. Perfect. So now that this is out of the way, in terms of creating our template, I'm going to come back here and I'll go to my, let's come to the library folder. So inside of the source, we have this lib. Now inside this lib, I'm going to create a new folder which I'll call email templates. And inside of this email templates is where I'll now create my invoice.handlebars. So create this guy and say invoice. I think you can also say invoice.js. Okay, let's just try .js. I think .js will also work. And then just paste in that template and save. That's all. You don't need to do anything here. Just save it, and you can even, okay, I'll not close that. I'll leave it open in case I need it again. So now that we have this guy here, you can now come to your email action and you can now convert this template to something that can be sent to the user. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that using these handlebars. All right. So make sure you've imported all as handlebars from handlebar. Okay, so this is the URL for the template edit. So now let's create the template. So we're going to create a function. It's a function that will actually convert that template. So function, and that function is going to be called compile template. Okay, let me see if it will help me. So I'll say compile template, and let me just open it up. But I don't just want to compile any template. I want to say compile invoice template. It's quite long, but I mean, so when I want to send this invoice template, remember we have two variables. The first is the name and the second is the amount, amount. All right. Now here I will now say templates. So we're not going to say template source, we'll just say template. Let's shorten it. Now we'll now say handlebars.compile, and what we want to compile is the invoice template, this one. So what that means is that we need to import this invoice template, and I'm just going to call it, wait, we didn't give it a name. I'm so sorry. Wow, I forgot. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. So we need to come here and right click this guy and Ctrl+X to cut it and create a variable. So here I'll say invoice template, and it's going to be equal to, now we're going to use backticks. Hold on, have I done the backticks? Ctrl+Z. So we're going to use backticks, and inside of this backticks is where we will now paste in the HTML. But before we do that, let me export this guy. So I'll just say export invoice template, and it's just going to be our entire HTML. So you see, this is better, a lot better. So save. So what that means is that we can now come back to our email action, and then we can import the invoice template. So here I'll say templates, and inside here I'll just reference my invoice template, and then I'll just import it. So you see, I've imported it. Perfect. Then last but not the least, we're not going to return it just yet. We're going to come down here like this and say const. Let's just say HTML body, and it's going to be equal to template, which is pointing to this guy, and then we're just going to reference the two dynamic parameters that we're going to send with it. Last but not the least, we'll now return this HTML body. Control C, and then I'm just going to paste that in here. So you see, this is how you can convert the template into something that can be sent to the user with handlebars. So let me just take a second look at it. Handlebars.compile invoice templates, HTML body. We call the templates. Inside it has the object of the name and the amount, and then we return the HTML body. Perfect. So now that we have that in place, we can now scroll down here, and instead of sending this message, right, what we will now come here is we'll now come here and say const template is going to be equal to, now we'll now call that function to compile the invoice templates, and then we'll pass it two arguments. The first will be data.name and the second will be data.amount. Now, where is this data coming from? It's going to be coming from this argument. All right. When we send this email from the front end, we're going to send this data that will have two properties, the name and the amount property. So after you've done this, the last thing you need to do is just come here and say, instead of sending the message, you want to send the template. That's all. So we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and save this guy, and then I'm going to come to the front end to actually send the email properly. So if you go to the front end, which is the list invoice, just like what we did before here, this time we're just going to remove, or maybe not remove, we're just going to change some of these things. So here I'll say invoice from Xenotrust, and I like to send invoice. Now we're not going to need the message in this one because we already have our template. Then what else am I going to need? I'm going to need the email of the user, which is supposed to come in this variable. So IMV. Let me show you where this IMV is coming from. So if I come down here to where I'm calling this function, send this invoice, I'm also sending the invoice object that has all the properties in the invoice. So if I go back here, hold on. If I come back here, this email now, it doesn't have to be static, it can be dynamic. So I can say IMV query.customer.email. So what else do we need? We need the subject, the email. Let me just remove this one so that it's a bit neat. Then what else do we need? Let me just check. I'm forgetting. So we need the subject, the email, and the data. So the data contains the name and the amount. So here I'll just come down here and say data, and which is going to be an object that contains a name property, which will now be imv.customer.name, and then the amount. Of course, you can send more information to the customer. So I'll just go ahead and save, and now I think we can test. So fingers crossed, I'm going to come to our application and let's test. So we'll send to this email that exists. All right. So I'm just going to click on this guy, send. Okay, so email sent successfully. So I'm going to come here to check. And as you can see, this is invoice from Xenotrust. Of course, if you open it, you'll see that it's exactly what we designed. Now, of course, remember I told you that you can take your time and design as much as you want and all of that. So that's how you can send an email or a dynamic customized email to your users from your NextJS application. All right, I'll see you in the next one then. All right, so we got to the end of the project. I just want to say that if you did enjoy the project, then you should definitely check out my Fullstack NextJS course. It's in a class of its own, right? If you like my teaching style, then you're going to benefit 100% from this one, because I'm going to teach you more than almost everything you need to know to build production level applications. So we're going to cover authentication, authorization, and everything. All right, so just make sure you check it out. I'll leave a link in the description, and there may be a discount for you if you see this early and you take action on time. So that's about it for this one. I will see you in another one.